Good morning and welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Water and Power Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. This proceeding is being broadcast on Channel 35. The exact broadcast times can be found by contacting Channel 35. Board of Water and Power Commissioners, please say present for roll call. Commissioner KATZ.
Present.
Commissioner LEHRER. President McCLAIN-HILL.
Present.
Commissioner NEEMAN BRADY. Vice President RUIZ.
Present.
4 board members, a quorum is present. Madam President.
Thank you. I don't have any opening remarks for this meeting, so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Board Secretary, for public comments.
Public comment is now open. There are no public commenters at this time. Public comment is now closed.
Terrific. Then we will move to briefing by the General Manager.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, board members. Just a few things to report this morning. First of all, last Tuesday, we did celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Green Team in conjunction with Earth Day. And we had an event attended by a number of employees as well as folks that do work with the department, held downstairs. Commissioner KATZ and Commissioner LEHRER both were panelists to discuss some of the efforts that have gone on here at the department. And we appreciate their joining us. So since 2013, the Green Team has been working to help embed the culture of sustainability here at the department amongst our employees. And so it was, they really focus on sustainability, biodiversity, now food recovery and production, as well as volunteerism amongst our staff. So I appreciate the work that they've done and recognize them in their 10th anniversary that we celebrated last week.
Marty, I just want to say that I was able to attend the event as an observer, and Commissioner KATZ did a fabulous job. Very informative and great event.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, I want to talk about something that's been big in the news last couple of days with the impending warming weather, and that's the increased runoff that everyone's expecting and beginning to see flooding throughout the state. I'd like to turn over to Anselmo to talk about what we're seeing and preparing for in the Eastern Sierra, and then Joe Romala will follow up with the communication plan that the board has asked about for residents in the Eastern Sierra. So go ahead, Nacy.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Good morning, commissioners. So absolutely, we're starting to see things flow quite a bit. The first thing I'll let you know is that last week, the Department of Water Resources announced that the allocation for the State Water Project is at 100%. That means that every contractor is going to get 100% of their entitled amount of water. For Metropolitan, that's around 1.9 million acre feet. This is the first time since 2006 that this has happened. So we talk about climate whiplash. We've gone from not enough and having to borrow to there's so much that you're getting 100% plus more. They even have actually opened up the option, something called Article 21, where you can, as a contractor, you can purchase additional water. It's almost for free. All you're paying is for the transmission of it, but you're getting the water for free because there's so much water in the state. And just how that ties into us, I actually had a chance to go up to the aqueduct yesterday and take a look at what was going on. And I can tell you that there's an awful lot of water out there. The southern part of the Owens Valley, the streams, the creeks are flowing pretty heavily already. You can see flooding in certain areas. The upper elevations, like Mammoth area, and it's still pretty frozen. All our reservoirs up there, you just see that layer of ice. But what it tells us is that once the climate warms up, we're going to see a lot of that runoff. Staff actually updated the runoff information that I provided last time, and it actually went up a little more. I reported at the last board meeting, we were at 223% of normal for runoff estimate. Now we're at 233% of normal. So that means it's over 1 million acre feet of water that we're going to get in the Eastern Sierra from Mono all the way down to Inyo. That's going to be coming into the system. As a result, staff has been very busy prepping the areas. I was able to see some of the areas where they're developing spreading facilities so that we can basically divert the water from the creeks and put it into these areas to percolate the ground. So my expectation is to see the groundwater level in the Owens Valley, specifically like in the Bishop Laws area, go up substantially. Back in 2017, it went up by 9 feet. More than likely that will probably be something similar again this year. But staff is doing a great job in managing that. They've been working 12-hour days, 7 days a week for the last month and change. So now we backed them off to 5 days because they are getting tired. But they're doing a great job there. So also what we have done is we added additional snow surveys so that we can kind of get a better understanding of how the snow is melting. Rather than just looking at the creeks and measuring the flow, we're going to be even more proactive and go back to the snowpack itself and take a look in there and make sure that everything is looking the way we expect it to. We have developed a communication plan that will be forwarded to the board today in writing. We also have a presentation that if you choose to hear it now, Joe Ramallo, AGM over communications, can go ahead and provide that at the desire of the board. And the last thing is we did hire, as part of the emergency, a contractor to help us basically armor Owens Lake. Because I can tell you, I flew over the brine pool. It's never been as big as it is now. And that's before the runoff starts. So there's a good chance that that runoff will actually make its way into the dust control areas. So consequently, the armoring and getting it all ready is crucial. So we're running hard on this. We're expecting some pretty significant flow. I will tell you that there could be some damage because the amount of water coming down is significant. One creek I saw is at 130 CFS, Bishop Creek. They expect it to grow to 600 CFS. I don't even know how you can fit that much water into that particular creek, but that's what we're facing. So we're doing everything possible to mitigate that, to make sure that we minimize any damage to our system. We protect the communities, we protect our staff as there as well.
2 questions for you. When is the peak of the runoff supposed to be?
Typically, you see it peaking around June when you have nice and warm weather. So that's about when you're probably going to see the highest flows. So, and it depends on where you are, obviously. The lower part of the valley, you're starting to see the flows already because actually it was quite nice and warm yesterday. The upper portion is still pretty cold, but June or so when you start seeing it peaking.
Okay. And then I know this is going to sound like an odd question, but given the way our system is laid out, is there any intent to make some Article 21 purchases?
Well, the Article 21 purchases would have to be done by Metropolitan Water District, not by DWP. No, you have to be a state water contractor,
okay.
Which we're not. We're a member agency of Metropolitan. My understanding is that Metropolitan was going to make some purchases, but I think honestly at this point it becomes a capacity issue because that means you get 100% of your water. So all their trunk lines, all their pipelines are probably going to be flowing full, but they probably will make some purchases. I believe they've already made some. They may make a little more, but they got 1.9 million acre feet that they're going to be able to manage.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know you said that you have a PowerPoint on the communication plan. I know we have a large agenda today, but can we get like a high-level view of that, just maybe the few slides? I think it's important to know what the communication plan is.
Sure.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. Let's see if we, can our AV team bring up the presentation? Thank you. We've had a wonderful experience working with Adam Perez and his team in the Northern District. Adam has been very outgoing, very present in media up in the Eastern Sierra, actually in here in LA as well. He was speaking to a group of fishermen here in Los Angeles on this past weekend and has been doing that readily. Lots of radio interviews up there in the Eastern Sierra as well. It's been some of their more popular shows talking about this actively, really on an every other day basis or everyday basis. So this is just a brief overview of our goals here is really to support the emergency response, to communicate. We will be participating together with Adam and his team in the Joint Incident Command and Joint Information Center that will be that is active there. I have a member of my team that's dedicated to support Adam. I also have the ability to deploy staff to the Eastern Sierra to support him as well, if need be on the ground. We anticipate that will likely be needed. We spoke to our staff and surveyed who would be available to respond, perhaps for a week, a few days, a couple weeks. So we have that ready to go if we need to deploy them. Adam has also been involved in training our staff as far as the issues they'll encounter there and the support that will be needed. Just to give you an idea of our target audiences, it really includes everyone in the Eastern Sierra, including the local tribes, which I know are of concern to the board especially, as well as keeping our employees informed here and in the Northern District and our customers here in Los Angeles as well. The messages we've been putting out there right now is really showing and demonstrating our readiness. that we're ready. We have a lot of equipment up there. I was up there over the Easter holiday weekend, and our presence is significant down every road in most of the towns there along 395. Again, putting safety first, we have signage that's been deployed and that will be continue to be supported. The information regarding sandbags and really supporting the local response there from local government officials at Adam's direction provided to our communications team. I'm trying to move through this quickly without doing it injustice. We have a dedicated website on our LAEasternSierra.com page. This is where we'll post updates that are local in nature. There's sections of this for different types of operations and notifications. It'll also be sent out to a dedicated mailing list that we have there and cross-posted to social media and promoted as needed. We have the ability to promote messages in the Eastern Sierra on our social media pages, all really driven from content to this page and shared widely there. Also sharing our information with county staff who also post to their social media pages. If you spent any time in the Eastern Sierra, you'll see that on Facebook, the groups there are very, very popular. It's how they communicate about a lot of activities and issues that are important, even from the Sheriff's Department in Inyo and other government agencies. We put out a regular newsletter. We've been sharing our news this way. There was a news release this morning that went out about our runoff preparations, and Adam was actually on KPCC this morning taping an interview as well. So we've been very engaged with him. Just a little bit more about the examples of our types of communications. Earned media I mentioned, media interviews with the two major radio stations that are there, as well as the Sierra Wave newspaper. And then we were recently doing an interview as well with Louis Hagan from the LA Times that should be coming out soon about Owens Lake and the impacts there as well. Newspaper ads as well, we have been running and have the ability to continue to run. Safety messages, we have a billboard there as well on 395 that we've been using for messaging. Just an example of some of the social media outlets that we've been using and amplifying our messaging through. And then partnering with these different groups of organizations, everything from the Bishop Climbing Rangers to the Chamber there locally. We've spent the better part of the last few years building relationships there with people from the organizations, and they've been very much welcoming our partnership now. A lot of times it's to discuss other issues or challenges, but right now everyone's focused on managing the runoff and working together. So we're there to help support that. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So my question is, I know that a lot of that area is covered by Edison. So are we partnering with Edison at all and making sure that we're giving the information to them as well?
From an operational standpoint,
Yeah, I can answer that. Yes, we are. So Edison is part of the Unified Command. So you got not just DWP, Edison, but the county, the sheriff, Caltrans. So all the agencies actually are collaborating and working together. So we communicate with them in a regular basis. Edison does have operation of several reservoirs up there, many of them that are upstream of ours. So that constant and clear communication is very important, because once it passes them, it's coming to us. And that we need to make sure that we're well coordinated. So yes, Edison is part of the conversation and the coordination.
and at the incident command meetings, they actually are present and present right alongside our folks, both operationally and on the comm side. They'll bring both their operations folks as well as their community relations staff. They have a big command center there in Bishop at the sheriff's office for that.
Thank you. Good job.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
That's it.
Thank you. I would like to turn over to Julie Riley, who'd like to introduce two new city attorneys that she has working for her.
Thank you. I would like to introduce Bethany Burgess and Morgan Hector, who are our two newest attorneys joining the city attorney staff. They will be working on, Morgan will be working on water and environment issues, and Bethany will be working on real estate and contracts issues. So we're staffing up.
Those were very short. Barely see you.
Wait, stand up, yeah.
Stand up.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you and welcome. Okay.
Won't remain incognito for very long, so thank you and welcome. And lastly, I would like to take a moment and recognize one of our employees who leads a division that's pervasive throughout the department, and that's our Director of our Fleet Services, Tom Patzloff. Tom completes 30 years of city service today, and he came back from General Services Division 2002 as an equipment repair supervisor, and has worked his way up the chain of command and really been a forward-thinking leader in this area. And I know that our board president has, taken advantage of a lot of things he's offered to the board to see the new things we're doing, new vehicles, human external cargo, all sorts of things like that. But I would like to turn over to Brian Wilbur, and then I know our board president has some comments she'd like to make.
Thank you, Marty. First, I'd like to have Tom stand up and at least come forward and be recognized. So here in the power system, we like to say nothing's too good or too bad for too long. This is certainly a case where something that is very good is not lasting long enough. I can't say enough about Mr. Patzloff and his services here. We want to congratulate him for his retirement here on May 1st for 30 years. Like Marty said, he is the Director of Fleet and Aviation Services. He's our General Service Manager of over 400 employees. He's been responsible for championing the fleet services, the human external cargo flight missions, and which helps ensure reliable transmission and distribution network. His leadership, his vision in fleet services, and partnered with the LA Unified School District to provide fleet maintenance internships for high school students with interest in vehicle maintenance. He's highly dedicated, motivated, inspirational, and an employee-oriented manager who embodies the LADWP values of professional excellence. On a personal note, Tom and I came through together. We chewed a lot of the same dirt early in our careers. I can't say enough about his honesty, his integrity, and his incredible work ethic. Tom has been a great friend, an incredible manager, a great mechanic from when he started here, and is a very employee-oriented and very personal-oriented. Right, he's been a great asset to this company, and he's going to be a tremendous loss. Right, on behalf of his group, Fleet Services, they put together this plaque for your exemplary career, culminating as the Director of Fleet and Aviation Services. Thank you for 30 years of distinguished service. Best wishes to you and your retirement, Mr. Tom Patzloff.
Madam President, I know that the employees that you come in contact with, Tom has been a frequent flyer and someone who is has really brought a lot of new and innovative ideas and thinking to you, and things that you've really welcomed. So I'd like to ask you if anything you'd like to say.
Yeah, no, thank you. I noticed that Tom was preparing to sort of sneak out of the department in a quiet and humble way. And given both his service and his particular way of lighting up this boardroom during his presentations, I was having none of it. I want to point out that in his role as the manager of fleet services, he's overseen a budget of $230 million and led a team of more than 400 employees across 27 locations. He's been the force behind our push to have the largest all-electric vehicle fleet of any LA city department. He's led the charge to adopt several hundred electric vehicle sedans, 200 EV pickup trucks, and the first 2 EV bucket trucks on the West Coast. We now have the beginnings of an all-electric construction equipment fleet with an all-electric mini evacuator and wheel loader. And we're expecting the delivery of an all-electric skid steer and truck tractor. Didn't even know that existed. Through his work, we've set the foundation to ready LADWP for vehicle-to-grid capabilities, medium and heavy-duty EVs, and more clean vehicles when the manufacturers finally release them in the market. And under his watch, LADWP was able to procure the helicopters that we use for our operations and security flights. He's also championed human external cargo flight missions for the power systems, which I did exercised my privilege as a member of the board to try out. It was amazing. He's invested in workforce development, facilitating Fleet Services partnership with LAUSD to provide paid fleet maintenance internships for high school students with an interest in vehicle maintenance, a program that I know that he is very close to and that I would like to see expanded. His career will be marked by his promotion of inclusion, diversity, and support of women in non-traditional roles, thoughtfulness, and practical, common sense approaches to problem solving. His relentless pursuit of doing things better, not to mention his humor and overall goodwill in his relationships with this board and with his team. Tom, we are very grateful for your service and for making LADWP a big part of your life. I want to say that I am personally both grateful for and inspired by your good-natured and thoughtful and can-do approach to leading our EV transition. I know that there are members of your staff present today, including your successor, John Smith, and would like them to please rise and show yourselves in support of our departing colleague. And sir, one last time before you depart the department, do you have any words that you would like to leave us with?
You know, this is kind of an emotional day. I mean, it's a great day. Don't get me wrong. One of the things I did, on the way down, not while driving, I logged into the retirement site, saw my name on there, so I'm actually officially retired. This is a great place to work. It really is. You know, I came in as a mechanic. I was given every opportunity to promote, and I always wanted to be that person that would make a change. I didn't want to settle for the status quo. And I've had great bosses through the years. I've had, you know, lots of opportunities. I've had some great days on the job. I've had some terrible days on the job. I've had some terrible days sitting right there. Every once in a while, I'll go back and look at the videos and go, oh yeah, I blew that one. But I do want to thank this board. You guys have been fantastic, guys, ladies in particular. The way you've changed things. I think you understand what the department business is. I think it's really been helpful for us in Fleet in particular. We're changing the way we're doing business. You know, we're with the support of supply chain, fundamentally changes. We've essentially tripled our budget. We've worked with supply chain and got the ability to do price and time contracts to do this. This is all the support of you as board members. This doesn't happen, you know, in a city organization, things don't change that quickly, and I really appreciate the support that you've given and shown me and my division, and I hope you continue to. Although you can beat up John and Keith a little bit. Don't give them too easy. But and I want to thank the management staff here, Marty in particular. Brian. It's like you said, we go back a ways. I've had. Sorry. Those of you that don't know, I lost my son in October of 2020. And this department was fantastic. Marty, Andy, my staff, they covered for me. They took care of me. There was a time and place where I just wanted to leave. And I didn't, and I'm really glad I didn't. This is a family. I was treated like a family member. I was, the respect and latitude that I was given to take care of my wife, to take care of my daughter, to get through this, to heal, I'll never forget it. Marty, I'll never forget it. So, this isn't just a business. This really is, 30 years is a lifetime. My son was born after I started here, and he died before I left. So it's more than a lifetime. This I can't say enough good things. I don't know where other people with bad attitudes worked before, but this is the best. And there's a lot of challenges ahead of this organization. We talked about the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule. Thursday and Friday of this week, the ARB is voting on this. This will fundamentally change how we do business here. And it's also going to change the city of Los Angeles. And so I think we're in front of it, but it has to continue. A lot of challenges in the news right now for this organization, challenges with water. But I can tell you from the fleet organization, I've got some fantastic people standing behind me. You're in good hands. I can honestly say I can walk out the door and I'll be able to come back for lunch and show my face because things will be handled. I might make fun of them a little bit, but there's some excellent people out here, and we're going to lose a lot with the change in the retirement, but we will survive as an organization. Lots of challenges, but I think we're up to it. So that's really all I have. Sorry, I didn't really want to go there, but my son, but it kind of came out. So thank you.
I do want to again say thank you and to acknowledge that we at our best take care of each other and strive to take care of the city of Los Angeles. So thank you very, very much for that. We will move to future motions. Are there any motions to be discussed at this juncture? None that I am aware of from other board members. I do want to indicate at this time that I will be bringing a motion working with the city attorney's office related to additional oversight and reporting around safety compliance as a matter of policy. To this board at the next board meeting. Do we have comments from our ratepayer advocate? Dr. Pickle, are there comments at this time, or would you like to hold your comments for the discussion of item 8?
Items 8 and 9.
8 and 9?
Why don't I?
I'm sorry, we're going to defer item 8, so it would be item 9.
Okay. And I do have a short document on that for you, but my computer had it and wasn't giving it back. And thanks to the clerk's office, it got recovered, and you'll have copies in a few minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so very much. Any other comments at this time? We have our discussion with the neighborhood councils. Are there any impact statements, Board Secretary?
No community impact statements or formal positions were filed by any neighborhood councils on any of the items on today's agenda.
All right, terrific. Then we'll move to items that have been recommended for approval. Item L2 has been called special by Commissioner Ruiz, so we'll not consider that item. In addition, item L8 has been deferred, so that item will also not be considered. Item L9 is also called special. And then we have an item which I did not, item L4, I'd like to call special. So with that, is there a board motion for approval of items L1, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 10?
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner KATZ?
Aye.
President McCLAIN-HILL?
Aye.
Commissioner NEEMAN Brady?
Aye.
Vice President Ruiz?
Aye.
4 ayes, motion adopted.
Okay, terrific. We will move then to management reports, beginning with item M1. Take one, pass it down.
So this report is on our compliance with requirements for the overhead line design and construction and maintenance. This is related to the work done in conjunction with the settlement that was recently announced in the news. Brian Wilbur and Walter Rodriguez will make the presentation.
Good morning, Madam President, Madam Vice President, and Commissioners. Thank you for allowing us to present on this subject today. So this is going to outline the compliance that we have in our overhead system in design, construction, and maintenance. Okay. So this first slide here is the overview of our distribution system as it stands. We're going to concentrate on the overhead distribution system today. So as it stands, we have over 7,200 miles of overhead lines. We have over 300,000 utility poles. We have over 3,100 pole-mounted capacitor banks and over 130,000 transformers. So in May of 2021, we brought on an inspection contractor to augment our inspection program that we had internally. So with that contractor was brought on to increase our inspections and to make us compliant, to help us to get to a compliance status. So in the first year of them being on property, they actually identified over 5 times priority ones than we had the previous year. So that puts that in perspective. This next slide. The California Public Utilities Commission sets the safety requirements for each of the priority levels that are outlined in the inspection program. So the highest level being priority 1, which the identified issue would pose an immediate safety or reliability risk with the probability of significant impact. And we are to take immediate action either by fully repairing the condition or by temporarily repairing and reclassifying the condition to a lower priority. A level priority 2 is variable. So it's either a non-immediate high to low safety or reliability risk. And the time period for correction is determined and identified by the qualified company representative at the time of inspection. But it's not to exceed the following. So a level 2A is nonconformance in a potential fire risk in Tier 3 fire threat district, and that is to be complied with within 6 months. A level 2B is a nonconformance potential for fire risk in a Tier 2 high fire threat district, and that's to be complied with within 12 months. A 2C is a nonconformance that compromises worker safety, and that is to be complied with within 12 months as well. And then all other level 2 conformance within 36 months. I'll hand it over to Brian at this time.
Okay. So specifically, looking forward and what we found in investigating our backlog of fix-it tickets. In March of 2023, we had a total of 1,448 level 1 fix-it tickets that have been identified by our inspection program. To address this level of backlog, the power system has dedicated multiple crews to specifically attack the level 1 fix-it tickets. In addition, the department has secured 2 new contracts with overhead line work contractors that will be concentrating on the maintenance needed to address this backlog. Until our contractors are on board, all available crews not dedicated to restoration or reliability jobs will be dedicated to completing all level 1 fix-it tickets by May 16th. This includes bringing in additional crews from transmission and streetlight sections, as well as using overtime on weekdays as well as Saturdays and Sundays until this work is complete. On this graph is a specific projection moving forward on what it's going to take to get into compliance and take care of all of these level 1 tickets by May 16th.
Wait, can you go back on that, please?
Sure.
So you're just going through this line here. It looks like the last few months, you've done 20, 30, a day, I'm sorry, days, sorry, last few days.
Yes.
You've done 20 a day, 30 a day, 10 a day. And obviously there's ones that are being replenished, so this is the list that's why sometimes it goes up. What are you averaging a day then? What's a reasonable?
So moving forward, we need to average a little over 30 to 32 a day to reach our goal. When we look at this, what we have currently being worked, so we currently have 145 that are in the middle of being worked right now. So the data is just the completed per day. So we are continuing to add crews and add available overtime so we can address this and increase our numbers moving forward. Right. The other piece is having our contractors come on board. We currently have contractors that are doing their onboarding as of right now, as of today.
Yes, and I actually just got word that they will be able to have crews by May 3rd and 4th. Okay. At least 3 crews to start.
Okay.
And how many can a crew do?
Per day? It varies quite greatly right, depending on if it's a pole replacement, if it's just a cross-arm replacement, or something very small, like a pin or high signs or things like that. So specifically moving forward, we're looking at these in a priority level on what the highest hazards are first, moving forward, and I'll go through what those are based on in the next slide.
Okay, well then, let me ask you a different way. So 32 are roughly being done today before these 3.
Correct.
How many crews are addressing the 32? Like how many crews make up 32 a day?
So I have a slide with that, but I can tell you right now we're averaging 16 to 20 in-house crews that are dedicated solely during the week to this and overtime.
16, 16, you said?
Yes,
to
yes.
20?
16 to 20, yes.
Okay, so
and
3 more, we'll just add another,
right.
20 per, yeah.
But we are working 7 days a week on this, so, and we've lengthened our days to 12 hours a day, and we're going to be working 7 days a week as well.
And sorry, what are the hours you do today?
We're working 12 hours a day, so
12 hours.
Yes.
So I just
And
want
the weekends, Saturday and Sunday as well.
And so the weekends are equivalent in terms of hours that
Correct.
are being.
12, yes.
Okay, so Walter,
Yes.
this is the first time I'm seeing it, so I just want to be clear on this. You're saying that in a few weeks, which May 16th is literally a few weeks.
Yes.
That the level 1s are all going to be taken care of?
The backlog of level 1s, yes.
That is the target that I gave them, to get this done
I
3
guess we're
weeks from
just
today.
trying to understand the math, to make sure that the math works.
Just so everyone understands, it doesn't take the equal amount of time to do each one of these. So sometimes the numbers will spike and sometimes they'll be less. So it depends on the complexity of the priority 1.
Yeah, but we're just looking at what you've done so far, and the current drop from 14 to 753 is not the result of crews going out and repairing all of these, correct?
I'm sorry, can you say that
So
again?
you got from 1448 on March 30th to 753
In 3 weeks.
in 3 weeks.
Correct.
So is that the result of actual physical repairs having been made during that period, or is that the result of something other? I'm just
Almost
trying to
600
understand.
Or they're recharacterized. There's no
Yes,
longer.
and we're going to go through those in the next slide, essentially those 695 priority 1s, and how many were done, how many were duplicates, how many, so I can have that breakdown on the next slide.
So go, we'll let you continue.
Okay. And moving forward with this, right, the adding of resources, so we are increasing the amount of crews that are attacking these on a daily basis. So in each division or in each district, right, additional crews are being added to attack
I know,
specifically
and
these
you know that we
ones.
like firm numbers, because saying that we're increasing, it's a material difference if it's 2 crews versus 10 crews.
Right.
So for us, we're interested, as you move through this, in what you're doing in just specific concrete data.
Okay.
And with this slide, does that take into account, and we're still inspecting poles, right?
And we're still inspecting, and there's increases every day, right,
so
of
where does it-
additionals that are coming in, and that
Okay,
takes
so
into.
where does that reconcile?
Well,
That is reconciled on this slide.
so why don't we let them go through and see
Okay.
what they've got? Has this been uploaded? Can we?
Yes, it was uploaded this morning.
Okay.
So moving forward, the safety of the public and our employees is of great concern to me and my staff, right? And we'll be prioritizing the level of fix-it-one tickets based on a multitude of factors, specifically the facility itself and the type of equipment, the location, its proximity to sites like hospitals and schools and residents, the accessibility to the public, and the direct or potential impact on customers, employees, and the general public. Over the weekend, our communications group put out a flyer for all Priority 1 customers, Priority 1 fix-it tickets, the customers that are in the area of those specific overhead fix-it tickets, received a bilingual letter on a door hanger. So everything that was adjacent to each pole was delivered to those customers to let them know and give them essentially a guideline and a phone number that they can call if they have any questions. The customer service reps will receive info so they can support all of those calls. And this information is provided to the mayors and the council staff also. So we have close to, this is the breakdown of our 695 Priority 1 fix-it tickets that we have so far. And these are our closed work requests. These are completed and now off the system. So 157 of those Priority 1 work requests were reclassified to another priority. And that means that temporary work was done or the fix of the immediate problem was done, and these were reclassified into a lower classification of the safety issue.
Was that done in the last couple of weeks, or was that done previously? I'm trying to understand. Did somebody go and review these 157, or did we determine in some other way that they were they could be reclassified?
Yeah, these 157 were visited and confirmed, right? And either the work was completed to reclassify them. A lot of these, when they come in, our electric trouble crews will go out there and make an immediate repair and then reclassify them, right, into a lower category.
So just, again, I just want you to, I get that. I just, because this goes to your work moving forward. So the 157 that were reclassified was the work that was done that was necessary to reclassify those 157 work requests. Was that work done in the last 2 weeks? Or did you visit those polls and determine that that work had previously been done but not entered into the system?
So that was work that was done. When we look at the 79 Priority 1 work requests that were canceled, those were specifically as duplicated work or they were done already.
Okay.
Right, or completed on a different work request. So where we have a poll that has multiple fix-it tickets on the same poll, right, the duplicates will get canceled and all the work will be completed under another one. And that's the 79, the ones that are canceled. The other 519 Priority 1 work requests that were completed, those were completed by the crews that went out there and did the work, or they were already, when they went out to go do the work, it was already completed. So those are all physically checked by a crew going out on that work.
So so in the last few weeks, you've actually done 157 work requests. Is that correct? At least 157.
At least 157 that had a temporary, right, or where they were reclassified to another priority.
How many polls got worked on, I think is the question.
So in most of the cases, the priority ones were completed. In some cases, they were made temporarily, the temporary fixed by design, and then recategorized as a 2 because it either is going to take longer to equate a permanent fix to that. So they reclassify them and they're made safe and compliant, but they reclassify them so they're now in the 2 group.
But just to be super clear, what you're saying is that the temporary partial fixes and the full pole replacement, whatever needed to happen fixes, those all took place within the last few weeks.
Correct,
and the portion that is addressing things that were duplicate or is really just the 79. So the rest of these work orders were active work that took place within the last few weeks.
That's correct.
Okay.
Or field verified.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem, yeah.
Okay.
Well, because if you did 519 Priority 1 work requests were completed and another 157, so you're essentially telling us that you did like 670 work orders in the last couple weeks.
Correct.
Okay.
And divided by 3 or so weeks, that comes to around 30.
Okay.
And you'll have the increased contractor support to hopefully increase that number a bit. How many new tickets roughly are we getting per day right now?
So it varies from 1 to 7 per day of category 1s.
And just so by design, the priority ones will go to our electric trouble. They will go out and assess and make a temporary fix or a permanent fix, depending on the complexity, and then move them to either category 2 or turn them over to the districts.
Okay.
Okay, so this next slide here outlines what we did with our crews and how we augmented them to complete this backlog. Prior to this, early March, fix-it tickets were just fit into your regular schedule. We lost our contractors. Our contractors left our premises March 6th, so we did no longer have contract support. Starting early April, we directed our crews to be reallocated to address the priority 1 backlog. And we had dedicated crews, 15 to 20 crews during the week. And all crews that were not assigned to restoration or reliability work, everybody else was dedicated to the priority 1 backlog. On the weekends, our crews equated to 22 to 30 crews. And those were those hours that we spoke of with our overtime hours, 12 hours. So that equated from 60 to 120 FTEs, our full-time employees. As I stated today, there is a pre-construction meeting with our contractors, and we were notified that they will be able to have 3 to 4 crews by May 3rd through the 4th, ready to work.
So I just need to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So we had a previous contract.
Yeah.
It ended March 6th.
Correct.
We didn't get a new contract until April 25th, which created a gap. Is that what I'm hearing? And then if that's the case,
Yes.
why didn't we not plan for that?
Yes.
Knowing that this work is continuous, why didn't we start the contract process before so there was no gap?
So specifically, so this was approved in 2022, this contract. The issues have been with getting all of their paperwork together, essentially their safety rating, their bonding, their insurance. Now that we have all of that, and then putting together our onboarding meeting.
Right. But not having a contractor is not the reason this fell behind. It's this, that was just extra staff that was not available to supplement us, but it's not the cause of this.
Correct.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, Commissioner KATZ, did you have a question?
I was just going to clarify. So I know it sounds like we're going to get crews sooner than what's on this slide, but then it'll be increased to 8 to 16 crews starting May 15th. And then you have things listed for June. Are those resources going to be dedicated to priority 2, given that you've said priority 1 will be complete by May 14th?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Yes.
So is there anything else that you were planning to present?
We have one more slide. I'm sorry, 2 more slides.
Yeah, so this next slide is a breakdown of the priority 2s, which is our next steps after reducing the backlog. So this will be tackling, of course, with our contractors to augment our crews, and our in-house crews will also be addressing these priority 2s with their regular work, right? So they're separated by districts. They're issued to crews, and they will address these as they're out in the field doing other work. This will be in addition to that. So our goal is to reduce the backlog totally to where we're in compliance and we're meeting the criteria set by CBUC.
And are these ticket numbers backlog or total?
These are total tickets.
Okay.
Yes. So 75,000 is a total that we have.
But I mean, in each of these
I'm sorry,
categories, this includes tickets that,
For priority 2s,
What's the number?
75,000.
and so within that and within each of these priority 2 categories, this includes both, it's all tickets that are assigned a 6-month timeline, whether or not they're late. So some of these are within
correct.
time. Do you
Correct.
have, is the next slide going to show the breakdown, or do you have the breakdown of the total backlog versus total priority 2 that are within time frame?
So Go ahead, Brian.
So I do have that information, and we don't have it on a slide.
That's okay.
Essentially, what is and what is not. So what is out of compliance, out beyond that 6 month, is 9,000, I'm sorry.
It is 9,000.
Yeah, so that one is correct, the 9,000.
Okay.
On the next one, it is 657.
Okay.
For our 2Ds, I'm sorry, I'm working backwards here on the numbers here. 13,384 on the 2Cs. On the 2Bs, 5,871.
So I'm sorry, is it, you said 13,000
Out of the
Plus.
46.
of the 2D, of the 2Cs?
Of the 2Cs.
And that's the non-conformance that compromise worker safety?
Those are beyond the 12 month.
No, I understand. I'm simply saying that the nature of the issue is non-conformance that compromise worker safety.
Correct.
And 13,000 are beyond the 12 months. The total is 46,000. And how confident are you in your data?
What I'm not confident in is the amount of duplicates that are on there. So I know that all of these, the 75,000 represents a little over 40,000 poles, actual facilities. So most of these are multiple where there's 2, 3, or 4. Some of these have up to 20 work requests on each pole.
So they may be duplicate in the sense of poll, but that doesn't necessarily mean duplicate tickets for the same issue. It may just be multiple issues that could get fixed by one crew going to one poll.
Correct.
And when a crew goes out, they'll do everything that's required at the pole to make it safe. But we have not digested all this data to that level yet.
So a couple things. Are you done?
Yeah, the last slide is just going through the next steps.
Can I ask just one question about something they said?
Sure, absolutely.
When you get the new crews, the full contractors, I guess that'll be fully up in June. What will your daily run rate be of being able to do repairs?
As we move forward for those specific repairs, so we're looking at what we can do 30 a day with our existing crews. So we expect to have twice as many because the entirety of our contract crews will be dedicated to this.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I was just trying to do the math of all the twos that are left and how long that'll take. And it's a long time, very long time.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, in putting together monthly updates for this board, being able to address exactly what we need and how we can, the timelines we can do moving forward, that we can put for this board on a monthly basis.
Yeah, because I mean, the twos are not good either, so.
Right.
Yes.
And I think based on everything that you just laid out, it looks like it'll be over a year and a half before you get through that backlog.
So we're also looking at doing extensions on this contract to be able to put more crews specifically on this. And it's also augmenting our additional crew, our crews that we have in-house.
Okay. So, hard to know where to start. What we're looking at is a snapshot of the department's work over the last, say, 30 days, which is certainly important, particularly since in the last couple days, we have sent over 3,000 notices to customers telling them that they either have or are in close proximity to a pole that poses a public safety risk. It's also, essential that we look at where we are and what we're doing in light of the fact that this board and the city has recently, determined that it was both prudent and appropriate to compensate a family for the loss of 2 of their loved ones to the tune of $38 million. It is difficult to be in a position
where we are having a conversation some 2 years after that incident, where the department is only able to identify its urgent work to address public safety issues for 3 weeks. The fact that a backlog of these polls exist, that that we did not take it upon ourselves to provide notice to the public, and that as of this moment, we can't determine how long it will take to deal with issues related to the safety of our own employees, is almost incomprehensible. It is all the more difficult when we review our history with these issues. And the tough part about being on the Board of Commissioners is that you rarely sit in these chairs for very long, and certainly not for decades. But looking back, we've been here before, more than once. And the most difficult thing to digest is the article that was written by the Daily News in 2014 on this issue that could have been written yesterday regarding faulty data, the failure to inspect and repair, alluding to significant failures and inability to address audit issues raised by the California Public Utilities Commission. And so what I am interested in understanding is how it is that some 9 years after that and 2 years after a catastrophic accident, how it is that we are here today having a discussion about the urgent effort to address a substantial backlog of safety items on poles in the city of LA.
And you're absolutely right. And we have had this issue in the past, and this has been an ongoing issue with compliance and with our safety and our inspection and maintenance program. Moving forward, looking at what we have to do to be able to come into compliance is our major goal for us right now. Looking at how we got here and the items that were put in place, the contracts that were put in place to address specific issues and where they have failed, we're certainly looking at all of those and still dedicated to move forward to be able to do these.
You can keep talking to me about moving forward, but among the things that you don't want to do is to repeat past mistakes. And so unless I understand how we got here, I can't be certain that we're not just doing the same thing that we did before. And so, I mean, in talking to members of the city family who've been around a lot longer than me, they tell me that our most recent rate case was designed specifically to help the department address these kinds of maintenance-related issues. And having sat here for years, I have been personally privy to reports given by the power system referencing our pole replacement program and our forward-leaning investment of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into replacement and investment into our infrastructure. And so I just need to understand how that happened and how we failed yet again to address the the poles that were identified in our inspection report. So it's not that we didn't know. I mean, that's the dirty secret, right? We knew. We just didn't fix the poles. So you need to tell me how that occurred and how that is being remedied.
When we brought our contractors on board specifically to address pole replacement, right, and that was looking at the age of the pole, right, and the quality of the pole. And this was based mostly on the age of the pole, as anything over 60 years being a candidate for replacement. The concentration at that point for our contractors to replace poles as our #1 priority, right? But a 60-year-old pole is not necessarily a damaged pole or a deteriorated pole or a rotten pole. The age of the pole is not what we need to rely on moving forward on why that pole needs to be replaced. It needs to be inspected and tested to determine whether or not it needs to be replaced.
So you made a reference to the contractor. Did the contractor determine which poles we were going to address as part of the pole replacement program?
Partially, yes. So we will write a job for a rotten pole that is based on our inspection, and based on the age of that pole, they'll look at all the poles in that surrounding area and replace all of those poles. So our contractor was concentrating on poles.
The contractor, so are you telling me that we essentially contracted out the decisions about which poles would be prioritized for replacement, and as a result of that lack of oversight, that we just didn't prioritize the poles that were identified in inspections as having level 1 priority replacement issues?
So those level 1s specifically for pole replacement, yes, they did concentrate on those, but not all level 1s.
No, I said fix it, all level 1s. I'm not, don't play with me.
I understand.
Well,
Because right now, it's, because again, if you're talking, I made reference to our PSRP or our replacement program as simply an example of the infrastructure investments that we've been making, and frankly, what you've been highlighting to this board. What hasn't been brought forward has been any mention of the inspection program and the identification of unsafe conditions on poles and the failure to, or the status, let's call it that, the status of addressing those conditions. So what I'm trying to understand retroactively, and you have to just forgive me for just a little bit, because I have been struggling with issues around trust from that side of this table and this side. So as you have been reporting about the investment in the replacement of our infrastructure, and largely that's been through this PSRP program, I am trying to understand where and how we were prioritizing or addressing replacement or repair on poles where conditions were identified as being a level 1 safety risk.
So our priority was replacing poles, and our contractors were replacing poles. The priority 1 fix-it tickets are not all pole replacements. They are cross arms. They are multiple of different items.
So when you say our priority was replacing poles,
correct.
Should I infer from that level 1 fix-it tickets, particularly those that did not involve the need for a pole replacement, were simply not prioritized?
That is correct.
And so
with the focus on moving forward, I think what the president has raised that is really important is not just this immediate effort to get rid of the backlog, but what is the new process moving forward that will ensure prioritization so that we don't end up in this situation again.
And that is exactly what we wanted to bring forward. That is our dedication moving forward, is having our contract crews address the level ones, right? Not just the pole replacements. And that is every level one that comes in, no matter what it is, that we're attacking it right away. Moving forward with our contractors, having their focus on that.
You keep saying our contractors, having our contractors do it, but I just want to be super clear. Our contractors just do what we tell them to do, correct?
Correct.
So the failure to prioritize had nothing to do with our contractors.
No.
It's not our contractors that need to shift how we do this work, right?
Right.
It is our department, and frankly, whoever it is that is providing leadership and oversight of these issues that have to shift, because again, understand my confusion or my frustration here. And I asked and said to you, Marty, that in a department where we say over and over and over that safety is our number one concern, how is it that we fail to prioritize safety as it relates to repairs and work, both in terms of public safety, but when we look at level twos, and I'm looking at 46,000 reported issues that require repair that implicate employee safety, 13,000 of which you say have been in existence for a year or more. There's a disconnect in terms of how we're doing our work, how this department, it's doing its work. Where is the safety infrastructure that ensures that this happens, that this is being properly prioritized? Obviously, we've got competing demands in terms of what we need to produce and do, but somebody is making decisions about which of those things are being prioritized and which aren't. So I'm trying to understand how that changes moving forward, or what the rationale was that got us to where we are at this juncture, how that could not have been the priority.
And to be more specific, I'd like to see, if not at this meeting, certainly at a soon meeting, really what resources are required and what is your plan, not only to eliminate the backlog, but then moving forward, how are we going to keep from having a backlog again? How do we make sure that we are staffed, whether it's a combination of internal and contract resources? What are those levels that will keep us from hitting that backlog and allow us to address these tickets within the times that are recommended by the regulatory agency?
And then, although I do appreciate the information about how we're catching up, I always start with the why. Why are we in this situation? How did we get here? I mean, this is our core business. We're water and power, and power is one of our core businesses. So why are we in a situation that we're, out of compliance by such extreme measures? And I think that's what, I heard the president saying, what is our strategy? It's not just about, it's not whack-a-mole, let's just fix this. It's like, what is our overall strategy to make sure that we don't, first of all, I don't know how we got here, but how we don't make sure we don't get in this situation again.
And very specifically, this is my responsibility, right, moving forward on where we're at in the power system and how we've gotten here and how we're going to move forward on this. And, one of our biggest issues on the problems that we've had reaching back to 2014 was the inspection program. Our biggest moving forward to have Osmos come in and start improving our inspections put a huge increase in the amount of fix-it tickets that were put onto our system. And we just simply weren't prepared for that amount of influx of level one
But that
fix-it
goes back to
tickets.
strategy, instead of saying, this is independent, this is independent, this is, strategically, we're a holistic system. And how does it all play together? And knowing that if we're going to make a decision here, how it's going to impact later on down the line.
And if I could answer, the piece that was missing was to use this inspection data to drive our PSRP. And so PSRP was focused on replacing poles that were aging. We'd give a contractor an area where we know we had bad poles, and that was part of the plan. And we've replaced 2 to 3 times the number of poles that we had back in 2014 when this first came up, and both use of our own crews as well as the contract crews. And a lot of our own crews are doing, customer connections of the work that we're driving for housing increases and things like that. So the contract crews, it's not necessarily because they're contractors, but because that's how we supplement our forces, as well as bringing in daily rates and people who are, hired from the union hall that aren't necessarily department employees, but work side by side. In the last year and a half, 2 years, we shifted a little away from poles to increase cross arms because we realized that cross arms were actually a source of failure more than poles were. And so there's been an increase in that. But again, to your point, we did not take this list and then use it to inform the PSRP, which should have happened. It should have been, it's all infrastructure work. But instead of how we were devising those packages, this list should have been the way that we directed that PSRP work with those resources. Replacing 3,600 plus poles a year would have knocked these poles out. 11,000 cross arms a year would have knocked these cross arms out. And so that was the disconnect. We're trying to figure exactly how that disconnect allowed to happen. It had been disconnected for a long time, but why it did not get connected, that's our responsibility for not connecting that and making that drive this work. Going forward, the new contract, we'll treat it differently than the past contracts, where this work will drive the PSRP work. It's all infrastructure work, but it's a selection of which infrastructure work gets the priority, and this was not given the proper priority that it needed to have.
Marty, that's a very good explanation, and I appreciate you saying that, it was missed, essentially. How it was missed, it sounds like you're still trying to determine, but it was missed. You had oversight of that general area, so did you, Brian. Beyond this, it makes us wonder what else is being missed. So
I agree.
This is a massive issue in and of itself, and we should get to the bottom of how and why it was missed. And I think that there's an expectation that we learn more about that. But also now we wonder what else.
And this is where I need to elevate for the board a complete list of all the work we need to do and what we see the gaps are to make sure that there's nothing hidden like this that's not elevated and not reported. There was a time a few years ago where we had a lot of outages in summertime, and we diverted a little away from pole replacement to transformer replacement because we had an issue with failing transformers. And we knocked out a huge number of transformers over the course of a year and reduced power outages. So the work has morphed as needs have been. But again, it has not been responsive to this list. This list is operated, unfortunately, isolated from the formatting of that work. That was an error. And this work needs to, especially as the board president said, this is safety related work. All these issues in this inspection is because of safety of the public, of our employees, of wildfire hazards. So by its very nature, it should be prioritized as the first work we attack, as opposed to cookie cuttering out parts of town to say we're going to tackle this area and this area and this area and this area. That all gets work done, but this work has to be prioritized, and that failed to happen.
Yeah, with a background that includes the operations side with aging infrastructure, I definitely understand aging infrastructure and deferred maintenance. And I think moving forward, it would help to have, it will be essential to have very clear transparency on how these issues of deferred maintenance are being addressed and prioritized and how safety is being worked in. So we appreciate the commitment, but I think we're going to want to see a clear plan for how it's integrated into the priority. And I would be interested in the future to also have some similar update on the water side. I know that we have a lot of aging infrastructure on that side as well. Is there evaluation and prioritization that incorporates safety considerations there as well?
Yeah, we will prepare that. And again, to the point, the question is what else is out there? What else is not being reported, what is not being elevated? And we are going to scrub every system we have to make sure that it's all brought together and that no effort goes forward and then by its nature ignores other efforts that should be informing that effort or maybe just even overriding it as a primary consideration. And this would have been one of those. This would have been one of those that part of the PSRP should have been an input directly from inspection reports. And we had this, so 2021, we had our first really robust inspection reports coming in. First time in our history we've really met the mark. That should have been directly inputted into PSRP and redirected the work at the time. I would not tell you that we have all the level 2s done or level 3s done, but we would not have any level 1s. And we would have been vastly different position than we are right now.
And was there an organizational disconnect? Is this an issue of there being a group that's more focused on asset management and capital renewal versus maintenance? Is there some kind of integration that needs to happen there?
I'll leave it to them, but I think part of it is different groups responsible for different pieces, putting work packages together for the crews, and then an issue when it comes to hit Walter's desk with more work than he has people to assign to as to how to try to accomplish it. And I don't know, Walter, you want to comment on that?
Well, absolutely. As you all know, we did lose quite a bit of our journey level employees to contractors and to other utilities. So that really, we took a big hit there. Not that it was, any reason why we didn't see this, but it came down to just the fact that we were not made aware of this issue, right? Which is something that we're going to correct moving forward. Right, we're going to ask for that. We track these, monitor them, prioritize them, and complete them.
Who was supposed to make you aware?
The inspection and maintenance group.
Okay, so there's an inspection and maintenance group.
Within our division.
Within your division?
Yes.
And they tell who?
They should be informing upward management, which eventually would get to my desk, right?
And are you saying they don't?
I was not made aware of this particular incident and this backlog, so that's moving forward. We are going to ask for weekly updates on what's incoming and what's being processed and what's being completed.
Yeah, I got to tell you, the thing that, and Commissioner RUIZ sort of got to the heart of it when she said this is the core business. And again, it's unsettling to feel like it's being driven by board inquiry and oversight, by, enterprising reporters, by lawsuits from, citizens whose lives have been inalterably impacted by our failure. As a core business, we would expect that this is what you'd be on top of.
Yep.
And I'm not feeling like that's where we are as we sit here today. And this report doesn't provide any confidence that we've made progress. What this report is another reaction to some outside stimulus designed to bat down the hatches and make it, stop. And I got to tell you, you have a city that is not feeling terribly confident about our capacity. And everybody deserves better than this, everybody. And I don't know how we get to better. And I think that Commissioner KATZ has much more artfully described the beginnings of what we'd all expect to see on the road toward better. But frankly, that's not being presented today is disturbing. I know that among the questions, and there are a lot, is where are these poles? Like, where are these level 1 on a map? Where are they? We've privately advised people, but, folks are driving down the street and looking up. They're going home and wondering, is it down the street from me? Is it near where my kid walks to school? So I would be interested in seeing some mapping that can be shared so that people can easily see where they are. There are others that wonder, are they distributed in a certain part of the city more significantly than other parts of the city? They're just basic questions like that that we have to come forward with, and we have to come forward with today. And
Yeah. I think also, culturally, there's obviously a real shift that needs to happen here. If the crews did not bring this forward to management, I first of all want to say that it is management's responsibility to ask questions. Just like we are asking questions here as a board, I think it's very critical for management to ask what's broken and not just for the highlights of what's being done well, and to create a culture where employees are not scared to tell you when things are broken or behind, and that they feel that they can bring forward requests for resources. Maybe those resources won't be there, but the request should come to you, and you should bring that request to us to figure out what is really needed here. And so I think, in addition to actual resource planning, I think there needs to be some clear focus on how to shift that culture such that problems like this will not stay hidden. People will not feel that they need to hide them, that they feel they can bring them forward, and that we as a department want that transparency, that we want that clarity on where the problems are, because you cannot fix, and we cannot support you in fixing what is not brought to light.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. And I think with our inspection and maintenance system and the reliance on the software to be able to move projects forward really is where we failed to have proper oversight and leadership on this particular item, where we weren't, strictly informed of everything that's going on, but it's the management's responsibility exactly to do that, to find out where the holes are, right, and to make sure that things get addressed properly.
And it should be aligned with your budget process.
Correct.
Through the budget process, you identify where your needs are, and you align your budget with those needs to make sure we're running as a proper organization. I mean, these are not comfortable conversations for us to have, and, we're volunteers. We don't get paid, but, we all are dedicated to the department, and it's not comfortable to be sitting in this seat asking these questions, but it's necessary and needed.
Yeah, and specifically on Walter's team moving forward, sitting down with them and trying to identify exactly where those holes are and where that lack of leadership came into place is something that we're dedicated to identifying and keeping from happening again.
so just help me. Are we suggesting that we didn't know? Because clearly we had a contract to ramp up inspections, right? And we got that contract to ramp up inspections in part because we were out of compliance with respect to inspections, correct?
Correct.
And that was in 2021.
That's when the contract came into place. We started moving forward on that contract. I think it was board approved earlier in 2020.
Okay, so got the contract, ramped up inspections. So we didn't then, nobody in senior leadership was tracking or noticed that there was a resulting uptick in the identification of items that needed repairs? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it was not addressed, right, to the level that it needed to be addressed.
Because we knew, right? It wasn't that no one noticed. It was that we made a decision, we, the department, made a decision to not prioritize and address those issues, right?
Correct.
Okay, only because, again, this is not some matter of crews didn't tell us. We knew.
This was just not getting elevated to a level to make that decision to change the direction and moving forward to address them specifically. So this was on a lower level management position, right, that's overseeing those particular items. I'm not saying that this was hidden or wasn't known about. I'm saying it wasn't elevated to the point where we made a decision on it to move it.
So
No,
relieve
And that's
inspection.
a lack of leadership
hold
on that.
It was elevated to where then?
Yeah.
So the work that was being done by the inspections and the information that came in was, available to the group that oversees those contractors coming in.
And was it then, and who was it, and you're saying that nobody beyond that group knew about what was occurring?
Correct.
So can you just explain then, what is the structure then of inspections? So you're saying inspections is a less senior position, so not your peer?
Correct.
And so then where does that individual report to?
So they'll report to our distribution operations group, right, which will report up to Walter, which will report to me.
Who did they report to in 2021, 2022?
So in 2020, into the beginning of 2021, that reported up to myself. Right. Following that, it reported up to Walter.
So this group that had the information reported
Correct.
to you.
Correct.
And before that, they reported to you.
Correct.
And the two of you would have had the authority and the responsibility to make sure, because you knew what that group was overseeing, correct? I mean,
That
you
is correct.
understood, you knew that what their role was. So it would have been you that would have been monitoring what was being produced by these enhanced inspections, and then would have made the decision to either respond to them or not.
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay. And then at some point, you would have told someone else in senior management about that decision? Okay. Are there any other questions? Marty?
I'm
Just-
sorry, there is one more question.
sorry.
I'm sorry. Marty, you said that you were going to look at all the different groups and do some sort of analysis of, just to try to see if there was not another issue like this. What is your expected timing to come back to us?
Right now, we're already looking at all the infrastructure work going on because, looking back at when this issue first came up, actually, it was brought up, I think, in the early 2000s originally. Again, in 2014, we saw news articles on it. And we have invested substantial funds through rate increases in infrastructure replacement. So we're going back right now and looking at the work that we did accomplish and the work that we did not accomplish. And adding to that, we'll be adding all the other fields of work that we have, endeavors that we have going on, so that we can elevate all those to see what that true body of work is and where there's gaps. So initially, right now, we've already begun to work on what is the work that we're actually tackling, and then how does this work fit into that in the future. We will. I expect in the next month or less, we'll have that, probably ideally next couple of weeks, we'll have that first work done to make sure we have a very good catalog of everything that's been done. One of the
Power as well, or just power?
That's in the power system, yeah.
Power
yeah,
system.
Yeah.
Yes, so at the risk of repeating myself, I would really be interested to see on the water side. I know we have a whole replacement program based on the age of pipes, and I'd like to know if we are evaluating life safety impacts, for example, water mains that feed hospitals, or, that would impact in a greater way public safety, and find out if that's informing. Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner, thanks for the question. So a couple of things. The water main replacement is not solely based on the age of the pipe.
Okay.
There are several factors that we look at. The age of the pipe is one, the method of installation, the material, the corrosivity of the soil. We also looked at the impacts of these pipes. So I think I mentioned in previous meetings, we talked about the earthquake-resistant pipe. Part of that is developing this resilient network that feeds places like hospitals, like after quakes and other natural disasters. We ensure that we have ample water supply for those areas. But I'll be more than happy at some point in the future to walk you through in the presentation how we develop our mainline replacement program, because we do look at several factors when we are making decisions on which pipe to replace.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear there's not as much of a gap there, and I would be very interested in that. I know that some of our researchers have found a serious lack of water resilience and storage at the hospitals themselves. So I know that this continuous supply is really critical for our region, and I would love a presentation at some point.
We will do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to go back to Marty, though, in a month on the power side, you
In a
will
month,
come back to us.
I expect to have everything elevated so we know exactly where any other gaps are, if there are any other gaps, and what those issues are in addressing that.
Okay, so not the next board meeting, but the following one.
Yeah, and actually, if we have time, I know it's the budget adoption at that meeting, but I'd like to be able to present on that as well, if that's possible.
We would appreciate that.
I'm sorry, I was going to comment. I don't know if we have it in here. We do actually have a map that's available. I think it's posted online, but we have a map. There is a zoomed out map of the city which shows a distribution of the poles, and they are pretty well distributed across the city. And there is now a detail of the addresses. And I know we provided the council offices more granular maps. I don't know if we have that in this presentation or not. It's not in the appendix.
Priority 1 or 1 and 2?
That's the priority one
Priority
polls. So we'll provide that to you. It might have been stuck in the information packet that we provided that we sent to the council offices, but it maybe not, because we would not have given every office everybody's map necessarily.
Priority 1 are supposed to be completed within 24 hours, is that correct?
That is actually a department standard, so the rules say immediate, and is our interpretation of 24 hours. So, and that was adopted back in 2013 or 9 or whenever the rule went in place.
And what communications have you and Brian done to the council members? You said you gave him a packet, but did you talk?
Yes.
Have you spoken with them?
So our legislative affairs folks, Matt Hale, we've been working closely with all the council offices. Last Friday, we did a briefing for council deputy staff before we did any door hangers or any announcements, so they would know exactly what was going to go out in their area, because we know they'd get phone calls. We provided addresses and maps for the poles in their areas. And then starting the last couple of days, we completed something between 3,500 and 4,000 door hangers on the people who either had a pole in their yard or on a budding yard, because usually poles are in the back corner. So they'd be aware that they expect us there in the next 3 weeks, that they had a priority pole in their area that needed repair, and that we would be there in the next 3 weeks to make that repair.
And then moving forward, just to be super clear, the target will be 0 backlog, right?
That
These
is my
are
target.
24-hour repairs.
That is my target. Obviously,
By May 16th.
that is the target, and I pressed them. I said, we need to get this done. We need to lay all efforts into this to get this completed. And then,
but I mean, maintaining that moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, if on the 15th we get some level ones coming in from inspections, and this is in reality, this is one of the things we need to look at our standard. You have an inspection once a year. Theoretically, something could go wrong 364 days before the next inspection. And then our target is then, if it's level 1, it's 24 hours to repair. So we need to make sure that actually makes sense, because I fear that the standard we set for ourselves is not necessarily sensible or achievable, but it can't be months. Obviously, maybe it should be days or a week. But if we see any changes in those standards, I would want to bring those to the board to adopt as the standards that we should follow. But so a level 1 that hits on the 14th, maybe.
Well, sure.
Exactly.
Within each day, there will be some repairs needed, but nothing beyond 24 hours.
Because we are inspecting 25,000 poles a month right now.
Okay.
To get through all the poles every year. And so, yes, but we'll continue on that, and that is, we're going to lay every resource we have into this to get it done.
Given that LADWP has older infrastructure in many cases than some of our sister utilities, the once-a-year inspection is based on the CPUC standard. Should we be evaluating in areas where poles are older a more frequent inspection? Is that something that has been considered at all?
We have not discussed it. I mean, it could be considered. I don't know. it'd be proportionally more resources to do that, but I mean, it could be done. Or if we have areas that we particularly find troubling, the difficulties with poles, and it's almost like with water pipes, is that they may all be old in an area, but they may not all be bad in an area.
Right.
And so the change in focus is to address ones we know are bad as opposed to an area that we know are aging and needing replacement. But yeah, and I do think that when we get through this list, we will see substantially less tickets coming on because we'll have caught up considerably with a lot of pieces of infrastructure that are failing. That's my hope. I can't believe we could have this many continue year in and year out. Once we catch up, I think that and stay on top of it, I think we'll have better results moving forward, but that's yet to be seen.
Okay. So a couple of things with respect to inspections. I mean, this is 2023. There's technology that would allow us to more rapidly and more frequently inspect poles, including drone technology and other ways that we can get our eyes on infrastructure that we should probably be looking at. I do not want for a second for us to think that the addressing of those priority ones, the priority twos are of significant importance and interest. You all know that we have a member of this department who's losing both his hands as a result of an accident. And safety concerns have to be comprehensive, not episodic, or addressing sort of the one hot item. And so what I'll be interested in is a fulsome report on how safety is being addressed. And we've had a number of presentations, again, at this board from corporate safety about best practices and moving toward a program and a culture of safety. We need to move pretty rapidly to how that is being institutionalized, embedded, and implemented from a both pragmatically and culturally into how the department operates for the safety of the public and for the safety of our employees. And so I'll be interested in seeing that. And I, have difficulty discussing these issues in abstract terms when at the end of the day, it is people who make decisions and people who lead this agency and people who show up to work every day. And, I know how difficult it is for the department to employees, all of whom feel very connected to the organization, to pick up the paper and to read that that DWP has failed in some significant way. And it's not just the people who work here. I mean, this is a colossal issue from a city perspective, and which is why there's just so much frustration, disappointment, concern, and pain associated with the issues. There are thousands of people who work here and come in a dedicated and exemplary way to do their very best. And everyone is painted with the same broad brush, and that's just not fair, and it's not right.
So, Madam President, on this one, I would like regular report backs. I'm assuming that we're going to do this at...
We will have a report back at the next board meeting. We will continue to monitor this issue. We will have a system. We will work on, from our level, a system of compliance review. What I'm interested in is, from the department level, a system or a bit of accountability for not just the sake of accountability's sake, but for all the people who's got to stand up and stand behind what we do and who've been let down by poor decision-making, poor oversight, poor execution, and poor leadership. We just have to we've got to accept that as where we sit right at this moment. Fred.
Two things. One, we have a number of crews that are working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And as they get toward the end of this, if not already, they'll be exhausted. And there are risks of more accidents because of that. So, well, that's one issue we need to be aware of and be advised on how to monitor. Two, at the top level, the board has asked management for what other areas are we having problems in. And I think this might be an opportunity to set up an enterprise risk management process with reports through to the board on other areas where there are operational risks, regulatory risks, legislative risks, other business risks, so that this is systematically reviewed and reported. And it would be appropriate for that to report either directly to the board or to the audit committee.
Thank you, Fred, for that recommendation. I'm glad you share that view. In fact, Aram and Ann are looking into forming that already.
Thank you. I don't have anything more. I know.
There is one more thing. I just, in terms of the level 2, I don't think we got a great plan on how those were going to be remedied.
We do not have a plan yet.
Yeah, so we want to put that on the calendar to go over.
Okay.
Clearly, the level 1s are the priority by definition, but we need that very soon.
Yeah.
And by my back of the envelope, 1.5 years is not acceptable for completion. So perhaps you can come back after you've completed the system-wide, because perhaps the priority 2s won't be number 2 priority. Maybe there will be something else that's coming out of that. So can we say 6 to 8 weeks, Marty, for the plan on level 2?
That should be fine, yeah.
Yeah, and we'd like the plan on eliminating the backlog, but then also the clear plan on resources to prevent future backlog.
Okay.
All right. I think that we will thank you for your report. And finally, one additional thing. I know that we have notified our residents of issues with their polls. Do we have a plan to notify them when those issues have been addressed? So if I got a drop that said, we're coming, are we going to tell them we took care of it?
Joe's.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we'll send closeout letters.
Yes. Yeah. So if, well, so it's on the record, we'll be sending closeout letters to them that it got done.
Okay.
And did you say that the maps were going to be on the LADWP website, or they already are?
Joe, what's the status of the maps? I don't know, we've sent it to the council offices, and we have something posted. I'm not sure if the details are posted.
Actually, Matt Hale can provide the update on the council offices. I believe they've received the maps. We had not planned on posting it on the website, only because these polls are getting resolved each day. So we would literally be replacing them every single day with information that's 1 to 2 days still lagging. I can report to you that our call center as of yesterday had not received any questions from customers who'd received the letters, as an indication just of potential issues or interest there or concern. We could post them. Problem is the maps don't have, they're not down to the address level, and it could cause confusion.
Okay, will you share with us what was shared with the commissioner?
Yeah, we'll get that to you.
The council. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and if you have a suggestion for how it might be shared, and it's an ongoing discussion because the citywide map is, of course, not very granular, but it does give a good idea of the distribution. And then the more local maps in the council districts, as Joe said, would be ideally out of date very quickly.
It's dynamic.
We have shared address lists, but those lists literally from Friday was a list of 800, and then as of yesterday, I think it was in the 740 or 750.
So I think it'll be important to share a citywide map again, just for distribution purposes.
Yeah.
Because it is really important that people be aware of how this overlays. As I said, one of the concerns is, do we have underserved neighborhoods who have the bulk of these, level 1 issues? I'm told that that's not the
Not the
case,
case,
but
right.
it would be, we need to substantiate that. And I also know that we've got at least one council member, perhaps more, that are interested in more disclosure and more transparency, and we need to get to a point where we can do that and do that easily. And data is, people refresh data, within minutes. So it's hard to hear that it's not possible for us to update maps on a daily basis, but I will let that be a complaint for another day. Anything else, or is it possible for us to take a brief recess?
Nothing.
It's noon, so if we could, to break, if we have a relatively, or we have another
Presentation.
significant management report. So if we could break to 12:30, does that work for folks? Or let's say 12:15.
Okay.
Yeah, 12:15, 15 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Please maintain silence at the dais and in the audience for the next 20 seconds. Microphones are hot. Good afternoon. Please maintain silence for the next 20 seconds. Thank you. Madam President, we're ready.
Thank you. Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner KATZ.
Present?
Commissioner LEHRER is absent. President McCLAIN-HILL.
Present.
Commissioner NEEMAN Brady. Vice President RUIZ.
Present.
3 board members, a quorum is present.
Terrific. Thank you. We'll now go to our second management report for the day on the SPLRP.
Brian, you want to introduce the report? Come up here.
I'm sorry. For this report, we have Nermina. I'll let you introduce your team.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable commissioners. My name is Nermina Rucic-O'Neill, and I'm a manager of resource planning and system resiliency. And with me, I have Jay Lim. He's a manager of integrated resource planning. And for today, we have strategic long-term resource planning update for you. So Jay is going to open up the presentation.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you for having us. Today, we wanted to give an update on our SLTRP. Back in October, about 6 months ago, we went to the board and recommended case 1 as part of the SLTRP. And so today we have a recap of the process, where we are, and then my manager, Nermina, will go over the next steps. So just a quick recap, we want to go over an overview of the history of our strategic long-term resource planning process. The department has been a leader in our resource planning process ever since 2000, when we first developed our integrated resource plan. And this was far ahead before any other utility started putting together IRPs. In addition, we are one of the most transparent utilities, putting out a lot of resource plans that details all of our plans. And we've done extensive outreach, especially over the last several years when LA100 studies began. In the year 2010, we formalized our resource planning process, and since then we've been developing and publishing resource plans every year, with major updates every 2 years. In 2017, as the regulatory framework started very quickly evolving to where we're planning for 100% renewable system, it became very complicated, and at that point we bifurcated our process. The traditional resource planning process now became an integrated resource planning process, which would now be a regulatory requirement to submit to the California Energy Commission. And we also maintain our traditional planning process and renamed it the Strategic Long-Term Resource Planning Process. And so that was what was presented to the board back in October. 2017, we paused our process in order to move forward with the LA100 study. That was a 3-year study in partnership with the National Renewable Lab. Once that study was complete, March of 2021, we reconvened the 2022 SLTRP process and brought back all of our stakeholders and went through almost a 1.5-year process to publish the 2022. And so what the 2022 SLTRP represents is a roadmap for the department to meet its future energy needs while also meeting regulatory requirements and ultimately preserving our goal of reliability, cost affordability, and environmental stewardship. So just a quick recap, I believe the board is very well familiar with the LA100 study, but the LA100 study, some key takeaways was that it was 100% carbon-free was technically achievable by 2045 or earlier, including 2035. Second point was that building and transportation electrification would be required both for air quality improvements and affordability. Estimated investments for across all the 9 scenarios range from 57 to 87 billion, and this is in addition to existing obligations. It was also found that there will be significant job creation, about 9,500 jobs. And one of the key points that the department has really took to heart is that there's common investments across all scenarios, and that's something that we're moving forward with. We signed and put in service Red Cloud Wind, one of the largest wind projects. We're on target to commission ELAND over the next couple of years, along with many distributed energy resources and transmission projects. So I want to talk a little bit about what are the key drivers in developing a resource plan, and that's really complying with state law. At a minimum, the department needs to comply with Senate Bill 100. Over the last several years, this has been updated several times because of new legislation. Initially, Senate Bill 350 required 50% renewable by 2030. Senate Bill 100 increased that to 60% by 2030, and ultimately 100% clean energy by 2045. So at a minimum, we must comply to that. While the SLTRP, the 2022, was being developed, there was actually a new legislation, SB 1020, that added interim targets. And this would require interim targets of 90% clean energy by 2035 and 95% by 2040. And so staff is actively evaluating how the department can meet these interim goals, and this will be incorporated into our plan. So here is a simplified flow chart of what it takes to develop an SLTRP as part of 2022. From moving from left to right, so I want to emphasize this is a very heavy lift, especially planning around a 100% renewable system. So it took about a year and a half for staff to put this plan together. And ultimately, it starts with data and assumptions. Throughout the whole process, stakeholder engagement was central to the process. Over the course of a year, we had 11 advisory group meetings. This consists of over 50 different stakeholders. Along with that, we had 3 public outreach meetings, and we obtained feedback and incorporated that feedback into our process. As part of the data assumptions, that's really what the main drivers of our technical analysis is. And I want to make a note at the bottom left here, it's highlighted that this was based on information that was gathered before the Inflation Reduction Act was put into law. It was before the bipartisan infrastructure law, before the Ukraine invasion that put pressure on natural gas prices. And then also equity strategy study is still ongoing. We hope to feed in the outcomes of that, along with the integrated human resource plan. And so as we gathered the data it's a snapshot in time, and we conducted modeling shown in the green box here. As part of LA100 study, we adopted NREL's methodology to the modeling. So all the models that we use were very similar in approach. It's listed here, economic dispatch model, and so forth. And then we move forward with analysis. We typically analyze key metrics such as reliability, cost, greenhouse gas emissions, and then we bring that to the advisory group for feedback. And this was part of the 11 meetings that we had over the course of a year. And then in the yellow is the developing the plan, putting together the draft report. Draft report was released December of 2022, and we had a 45-day feedback period where we collected comments. So far, the feedback period has closed, but we received over a dozen emails and letters. And so now we're in the closeout phase, shown in the dark navy box, where we're gathering lessons learned, and we're in the process of finalizing the SLTRP.
And so the comments you got, were those from people that were already involved in the process, or just the public in general?
So for the most part, it included people involved in process. We also got comments from people outside the process, we reviewed them and elevated that to management to respond. Some of them required attention from a higher upper management, but in the most part, since they were already involved in the process, a lot of their feedback was incorporated into our plan. But if things that we can't incorporate, we'll take that, review that, and feed that into the next process. For example, there were some comments about case 3 should be the recommended case, but since we have already gone through the process and we've weighed the pros and cons of all the attributes of all the cases, we can consider that into the next iteration of the process. Okay, so as we presented the recommended case, which was case 1 to the board back in October, I want to highlight some of the key attributes. Over on the right side, it's just a legend of what each of these components mean. So case 1 is it has 80% renewable by 2030, which is 20% above the state law. So that's very aggressive. And by 2035, we're targeting 100% carbon free. And this would require a very high rate of build in terms of clean energy. On the second row here, about 1,100 megawatts of clean energy resources that we need to build every year, much higher than what DWP has historically built. By 2035, we would need to add over 12,000 additional megawatts of clean energy resources. As a sense of reference, today we have about 10,000 megawatts of generating capacity, so doubling our resources. On the DER side, we would need to add over 2,600 megawatts. And as part of our analysis and through financial services analysis, we estimated a average rate increase of about 7.7%. So some of the feedback we got from the board as when we went back in October was, case one was not affordable. So we're continuing to reiterate, looking at opportunities, how we can address cost affordability. Reliability metric, it's under the industry standard. Industry standard is 2.4 loss of load hours, so we're at under 0.5. And we had an estimated cost of 74 billion, so somewhere in between the LA 100 scenarios. As we went through the advisory group meetings, we collected feedback, and through the analysis, we conducted various sensitivities. These sensitivities helped the department evaluate the bookends, or essentially the range of scenarios of outcomes, where costs can fall for power system costs. For example, the 76 billion, if gas prices, fuel prices, renewable prices trend low, what would be the power system cost, and what would be the outcome if the prices trend high? So that's something we typically evaluate through resource planning process, and that's shown in the first table at the top. The table at the bottom is something new to our process in 2022. Because of the 100% carbon-free goal, we had to evaluate many risk factors. And so these 4 areas were feedback that we received from our stakeholders. Emerging technologies was a key area where we had stakeholders that had concerns about in-basin combustion and wanted us to run a sensitivity on no in-basin alternatives. So we evaluated hydrogen fuel cells as an example. Also, there was concern about what if distributed resources are not adopted, because that's based on customer adoption. So we evaluated demand response and what would be the impact if we fell short on our targets. We also evaluated transmission, because that's a key component. Transmission needs to be there to bring in the renewables. So if most of the more difficult in-basin upgrades were not completed by 2030, we evaluate what the impact would be in terms of cost and stranded renewables. And then we also looked at load sensitivities, looking at, because that's a high degree of uncertainty, whether or not, when or how much EVs will proliferate. So we looked at low load sensitivities, assuming if our load were flat or declined over time, and also a high load where if electrifications rapidly took off beyond expectations. And then we looked at what that would impact be to cost, what would it be to our resources. So I want to summarize, since we're towards the end of the process, a recap of what our stakeholder feedback has been over the last 11 advisory group meetings, the 3 public outreach meetings. There was, especially during the public outreach meetings, there was a lot of feedback and concern about rates and energy burden. As we looked at the rate forecast, a lot of our constituents had concern that the rates will be increasing year over year. But the department is very transparent. We broke down the cost and provided a rate layer diagram that detailed what's contributing to these costs. There's also comments around energy burden that essentially cents per kilowatt hour would not be the metric moving forward, but department also needs to evaluate fuel switching. So if a customer adopted electric energy efficiency, electric vehicles, building electrification, how would their overall energy costs impact them, as opposed to just looking at electricity rates by itself? There was also concerns around air quality and greenhouse gas emissions, more on the environmental side. Some other key themes was reliability. We had feedback that a reliable and resilient system would be needed for successful decarbonization and electrification. So that really goes along with the department needs to lead the way and be an example. Clean energy policy and the rate of change. So there was concerns about 2035 versus 2045 decarbonization. We also captured feedback on customer programs. Many customers were excited about being able to participate in the clean energy transition. For example, demand response or local solar. And also was a comment is that it must be done in an equitable way so that all customers can participate.
Could you back up?
It says the STLRP will require a vast portfolio of clean energy resources. Local resources, including both behind and in front of the meter, are necessary for all clean energy pathways. Is that, I assume that's stakeholder feedback, not an adopted position of the department. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Customers had feedback about wanting to participate in solar, so that would essentially be behind the meter solar programs. And then there's also commercial solar, such as feed-in tariff. Both of those would be needed for the clean energy transition. And we're actively looking at how, what would be the optimal mix of these type of programs moving forward.
So how does that all show up? Because you also indicated that customers are concerned about debt and debt burden. And a lot of these things either, feed into one another or would tend to push you in directions that are different. And I would imagine that I would not be surprised if the same customer who says, gee, I think solar's great, is also concerned about debt burden without necessarily understanding the relationship between the two. So how do we address that, or how does that come up, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. The 2022 SLTRP, what it does is it sets high-level megawatt targets by a certain year. However, we are still actively moving forward with LA 100 equity strategies, and we are looking to incorporate the outcomes of that into our next process. And then in a little bit, Nurmina will talk about the customer workshop programs, which will give us an opportunity to consider stakeholder feedback, including customers and also community businesses organizations.
Okay, and so let me just look at something really quickly. Oh, it's on the wrong one. Just because I don't know if I jumped ahead.
Can I ask, I was thinking maybe, I didn't read your mind correctly, but the issue that people worry about equity and billing equity, and at the same time pushing individual rooftop solar without a fix on our rates and the rate structure actually may exacerbate the problem with billing inequity. Were you thinking kind of like how those things come together?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand how all of this comes together. And I know that our STLRP is a rolling document.
Yeah.
That's more of a plan than it is, but I'm concerned that not everybody understands that because.
There's some competing interest things here, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and one of the pieces here that you discussed is the, you're looking at the energy efficiency programs and their impacts on rates. As sort of you identified that as one of the key, electrification and also the energy efficiency programs. And so when I am in the community talking to folks who are very invested in 2035, they don't seem to have good awareness for how all of this fits together. So I'm curious about how we are dealing with these issues.
Okay, if you don't mind, my next slide will get into a little bit more detail.
Okay.
So the next slide is about ratepayer advocate feedback. So I want to appreciate Dr. Pickle and his staff for reviewing the 2022 SLTRP and giving us feedback. We have a handful of meetings, probably at least 6 meetings throughout the process where we received very good feedback from Dr. Pickle and his team. So these summarize the first 6 areas, and the first one is really alluding to the point that you mentioned about distribution upgrades, PSRP, and energy efficiency being the key driver of rates. So there's been a recent alignment within our power system where before has been somewhat siloed, where energy efficiency group was part of joint system, but they have now moved into power planning. And we'll be working very closely with them in terms of the modeling, looking at what type of measures are being provided so that we can help optimize some of these programs. not only on energy efficiency side, but also on the PSRP side. So we're looking forward to that. That reorganization was somewhat recent within the last month, but we've already started having meetings with them to see how that can be incorporated into the future. The second area, the feedback we received from Dr. Pickle's office was that energy efficiency triggers higher rates and does not appear to reduce the peak load. And so similar to the first area, we receive a lot of data from energy efficiency, and we will continue to consider peak load reductions as part of the program. Some programs target the areas during the day where we need the capacity, whereas others are more base loaded. So we're looking at how to optimize the different mix of the different programs. On the third area is to the third comment was to develop energy efficiency and building electrification programs to complement each other. And the basis behind this was that energy efficiency reduces the load, whereas building electrification increases load. So perhaps they can support one another in terms of rates. So we're looking to, moving forward, to optimize the mix between the different programs on how to optimize both energy efficiency and building electrification.
It says additional studies, and again, I'm sort of zeroing in on this because this is all happening in real time. I mean, it's 2023 and we're talking about 2035, and even 2045 is not very far away, but 2035 is tomorrow. And so I'm just curious about how we're bringing all of this together in a way that is informing our, our programs and informing the work that we're doing right now. And I guess, so I have a question about that. Sure. And then I think in the overall, what I'm going to be very interested in goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is how investments that we need to make today are common to all scenarios, because I'm increasingly, because I have to be able to reconcile the actions that we take today, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, the programs, the contracts, the investments that we're making right now, to reconciling those actions with our, short and long-term goals in a way that I know that they're smart and consistent with where we're trying to get, and not premature or based on, our constrained time in terms of the ability to analyze the actual impacts of what we're doing. So if you can respond to any of that, that's fine.
Sure.
And if you can't, you can just hang there.
Yeah, I think the first piece of feedback regarding how do we incorporate energy efficiency, building electrification, distribution costs as part of moving forward, that all feeds into the data and assumptions as part of the process. That's really the first step. The outcome of the plan is only as good as what you put into a plan, which is your data and assumptions. And so we, over the next 6 months or so, as we moving on to the next process, we will have to carefully plan out these data and assumptions, meet with the different organizations. I know the distribution planning group has different scenarios that they're running in terms of like upgrades versus distributed energy resources and looking at the trade-offs. Similarly, energy efficiency has a different mix of programs. All of that could feed into our assumptions as we're looking at optimal mixes on how to get the department to meet its goal while also considering our core pillars of reliability, cost, and emissions. So that really is the next phase into our process. And then, of course, as we start collecting the data and assumptions, we will need to reconvene the advisory group when we start the next process and get their inputs. And we're optimistic that equity strategies will have a set of outcomes that we can then incorporate into our next planning process. So it is iterative, but I think we're almost at a junction point where all the data that we're working hard to consolidate will gel together so that we can move forward to create a plan that would be responsive to what the board's asked of us the past October.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
One comment on this slide. We'll have a formal presentation for you by the end of May on the ratepayer comments. In particular, we'll go into detail on the price impacts in elaboration of the slides, slide 18 in this package.
Thank you. Will those price impacts be able to work in any of the more recent issues that were not in the prior assumptions that were referenced on the first slide?
Yes, that's a great question, and Nermina will have a slide on that. So things like the Inflation Reduction Act, we will incorporate.
Wonderful, thanks.
Okay. The comment number 4 was that the 2022 SLTRP cases 1, 2, and 3 were very similar in builds and rate impacts. So we recognize this, and this was mostly driven by being responsive to the council motion. And so if we are able to add in, and we will propose this as part of the next SLTRP process, more flexibility in developing scenarios to evaluate the impacts as to how to minimize rates, that would give us more latitude in our planning. Number 5, to distinguish between scenarios and approaches, what's within the department's control versus out. So that was a key theme, part of 2022, that risk and challenges need to be addressed. And we hope to, as we re-engage with stakeholders, to capture what their interests are moving forward. The last item, number 6, is that sensitivity should combine factors moving in the same direction that are depending on objective. And so as we're moving forward, we're excited to reconvene the advisory group. But before that, we would need to do our vetting internally, and so that we can seek to align objectives. It's very difficult with stakeholders that have very opposite goals, essentially. So we're hoping to find some alignment there. Next slide, I'll pass it on to my manager, Nermina.
Thank you, Jay, so much. In the next couple of slides, I plan to provide you a brief update on the planning process next steps and timeline, outline challenges and opportunities that we are taking in consideration as we move forward. I will also provide you a quick update on some customer programs, workshops that we are planning for this summer, as well as close with some steps for developing a power plant roadmap toward achievable, equitable, affordable, and reliable power system. In terms of next steps, as you're already aware, draft SLTRP 2022 was released for public review in December. Comments were received in February. We incorporated those comments. Final draft was approved by our division directors, and it's waiting for executive management approval by end of this month. In the next several months, our resource planning group is going to concentrate on preparing to file regulatory compliance required CCIRP. Per Senate Bill 350 and Senate Bill 100, publicly owned utilities must file integrated resource plan to the California Energy Commission once every 5 years from the date that it was filed last time. LADWP CCIRP was last filed on, approved by this board on November 27 and filed on January 1st, 2019. Thus, we are required to approve the next CCIRP no later than November 27 of this year. Our team is planning to come back to the board either first or second meeting in October to approve this IRP document. In order to submit this IRP document, we need to follow a set of California Energy Commission's filing guidelines. In late 2022, CEC released a draft document of these guidelines and some issue guidelines. However, the final guidelines have not been posted yet. Based on our latest communication with the Commission, we believe that the final guidelines will be available by mid-May of this year. These guidelines include a set of standardized form that will be populated with the data from each POU, including LADWP, to ensure that California as a whole will meet its energy goals as outlined in SB 100. LADWP's 2022 SLTRP's SB 100 case will meet these requirements. As Jay outlined, 2022 SLTRP was developed in response to goals to achieve 100% carbon-free by 2035, which is 10 years earlier than state of California mandates, with a recommended case that outlines how this extremely ambitious plan can be potentially achieved. SLTRP as a comprehensive 25-year forward-looking plan needs to be continuously revised through iterative process that builds on strengths of previous evaluations, reexamines new assumptions, incorporates new industry conditions, new technologies, incorporates updated market forecasts, new policies, bottlenecks, and also incorporates new opportunities. Thus, our next iteration, which we have already started working on, will build on recommended case and incorporate needed updates. In the next slide, I will touch base on these, more on these details. If you can go back, I'll return to that slide. For every goal that we want to achieve, it needs tracking and measuring its progress. So SLTRP dashboard is currently being developed to track various KPIs and programs such as large-scale renewables, local solar, behind-the-meter energy storage, and electric transportation as some of the goals we track. Also, we have developed master project schedule that consists of all the projects that are relevant to meeting these goals. And we will enhance better tracking of these projects, understand interdependencies of these various projects to eliminate and minimize risk not meeting the deadlines. Also, we have actively started looking into managing risks. Like previously said, it's very important to understand the risks that affect our financial, regulatory, operational, workforce, customer programs, and so on. Thus, we are currently developing comprehensive SLTRB barrier mitigating matrix that will be used to assess these barriers and its risks from being insignificant to moderate to critical. In this way, when we use these tools, we will be able to stay vigilant and agile, and we'll be able to correct the course more effectively toward our goal. Next, SLTRP, like Jay said, typically utilities develop IRPs and SLTRPs every 2, 3, 5 years, sometimes even 10 years, but LADWP since 2010 to 2017 has done that on an annual basis. The SLTRP 2022 was very heavy lift and largely driven by the policy. Due to the resource constraint and the need to thoroughly vet now the limitations, 2022 SLTRP recommended case and incorporate many constraints. Next SLTRP process will take about 2 years. We already started working on this process early this year and plan to complete it with the publication of the IRP by December 2024. As we are in the midst of utility industry transformation, modeling is also more difficult. It requires more time to incorporate various inputs. So this SLTRP, in addition, has to make sure that we align new process with the regulatory compliance data collection and reporting and other plans, to incorporate other plans such as transmission planning, distribution planning, and so forth. Next slide. As we move forward with our strategic plan, the goal of the next SLTRP must be to complete detailed vetting and incorporation of constraints and limitations. On this slide, I have some of the major challenges that we are facing with our strategic long-term planning. Starting with implementation feasibilities, human resources, outage constraints, build-out schedules, real estate needs, supply chains are just few constraints that must be vetted and ramped up to support the build-out of clean energy resources. SLTRP will need to capture updated staffing constraints and assess how it will be impacting not just meeting future goals, but as we saw, current goals. To understand what staffing needs are, our peers are working on preparing final integrated human resource plan that will be presented to this board by July 2023. Results of that integrated human resource plan will be fed into as input to our next SLTRP. In addition to human constraints, staffing constraints, we need to consider other potential barriers to well orchestrate our build-out, such as to balance between simultaneous or staggered outages on our system that our system can sustain at any time without compromising its resiliency and reliability. We also have to consider availability and need for future real estate required for expansion of distribution equipment and transmission lines, and also have to understand how supply chain constraints are affecting our implementation process. Second very important challenge and constraint is to maintain system reliability, but it's in the form of our responsibility to select an adequate resource portfolio to make sure the power supply to our customer is dependable at every point of time. This is our obligation and ultimate purpose, but also it's a matter of regulatory compliance and also economical, financial, and social vitality of our city. One of the most important conclusions of LA100 study is that while we progress toward our 100% decarbonizing goal and integrating more renewables into our mix, we need to make sure that we also incorporate firm dispatchable energy to make sure that when we don't have solar available or wind is not blowing, or if energy storage is emptied out and we cannot fill it in because transmission lines are cut off due to either equipment outage or upgrades or even wildfires, we will have a backup power to support an uninterruptible system for days. I have also another element here, which is climate change, that has already been considered in our 2022 SLTRP because we simulated 250 different weather conditions. We can go beyond that. This plan is 25 years plan. LADWP has joined EPRI's Climate Ready program, which is resilience and adaptation program, from which we will learn more and incorporate more data, such as from NOAA agencies, what they predict in our LA County climate change effect will be in terms of the droughts, temperature rises, more extreme weathers, and so on. And we plan to implement that in our next SLTRP. Also, affordability and equity is very important. Jay touched upon that. But outcomes of our current LA100 equity strategy, which is due to you, the board, for approval and review this summer, will need to be factored in next SLTRP cycle because it's an opportunity to address historical inequities and design the policies, intentional policies and programs to boost the customer participation in clean energy programs, such as demand response, energy efficiency, rooftop, solar and electric vehicle adoption, especially in disadvantaged communities that carry largest energy burden. Another constraint or condition that needs to be taken in consideration is availability and readiness of technology. SLTRP 22 has taken in consideration that dispatchable generation capacity utilizing renewable fuels will be technologically mature by 2030 and deployed by 2035 to meet our 100% goals. However, this is subject to technological readiness, which is a constraint we can't control, and deployment of schedules needed to be, and therefore the deployment of schedules need to be carefully considered. There is just some of the major challenges that needs to be taken in consideration as we further plan our power system roadmap and next SLTRP. Jay, can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you very much.
So as we move forward, and I just want to comment, I'll say a couple of things. First, It is an ongoing pleasure to receive these updates and reports presented in such a clear and informative way. You've taken, you know, a very large body of work with lots of moving parts and distill them down to bites that are digestible, but that don't lose the nuance of the information that's being presented. And so I want to say thank you for that. And as presenters who aren't before the board a lot, I also want to compliment just the overall presentation to this point. I also would take this one slide and fold it up and take it everywhere I go because I appreciate, for me, this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of planning and execution. And I appreciate all of the incredible focused and necessary work that continues to go into our planning. I also think it's incredibly important that we keep front and center all of the challenges related to implementation so that we can continue to move this conversation and this work forward, not just as policy, but as action. And so, you know, these are not insubstantial challenges, as you all know. And I am aware, having, you know, conversations intermittently with various members of the department, that this is the stuff that keeps people up at night. And so I just want to say and recognize and acknowledge that. And to Marty, Aram, rest of the department's leadership, I continue to want to understand how addressing these challenges informs our actual, you know, budgeting, our staffing, our focus and areas of attention within the department, so that we are not just talking, we are preparing to walk the talk. And I know we're not there yet. I also know that we are going to have to pivot pretty significantly and pretty deliberately, or we're just, you know, going to be, or we're having interesting theoretical conversations, but we are not acting as an operating unit intending to make this substantially real. So I look forward to and want to make sure that we are having steady and regular conversations about this, because this is, you know, the nub of what we are seeking to do. I'm also looking forward to integrating more presentations from our water system as we begin to look at its long-term plans, which again, long-term is not that far away. And Dr. Pickle will be certainly interested in more dialogue. And I know that there's a meeting that needs to get just devoted to some focused conversation about our planning and your perspective around it in connection with a few of our programs. But this is just incredibly important, very well presented. It looks it's so calm and interesting and lovely and pretty on the page, but it's also is so impactful and it's everything. You know, these are the issues, we either address them or we don't. And they're all very integrated. And as you say, even our stakeholders, depending on who they are and what, have different expectations, different priorities, sort of big picture, want to arrive at the same place, but the devil's in the details in terms of what they're leading with. And we are going to have to confront all of that in a way that we can begin to execute against it. And then the last thing I'll say about this goes to our budget. Marty, you made reference to the budget coming back, and I think I heard that the Integrated Human Resources Plan we expect in July. I know our budget gets done in June. And I keep wanting to understand, Anne, how our budget relates to what we say we're working to achieve. Because if our budget isn't informed by what's necessary to actualize our work, then again, we're just, sitting in this room saying nice things to people without, working to deliver on those things. And we have to get, it is important that we be considered credible and that we maintain credibility with all of the stakeholders. So having all of those things aligned is going to be something that I'm looking for. And understanding how they align is going to be something that I'm looking for in the context of our budget presentation. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for your comment. The next slide, I would like to update you on upcoming program implementation workshops. Expected this summer, we have a series of program workshops to inform and collect feedback from our customers and advisory groups on our existing very robust customer programs. And feedback can include what is working, what is not working, what vital improvements we can make to our existing programs, and what programs we need to sunset to achieve equity and the long-term goals. Our colleagues will plan these 5 or more workshops. They will include members of advisory groups that participated in SLTRP process, as well as equity strategy process, especially equity strategy process. And they will hold these workshops here in LADWP's headquarters on a WebEx in various community-based facilities. And these workshops will allow our program designers, like I said, to hear feedback and improve our existing and design new programs for our customers that relate to solar, local solar, demand response, energy efficiency, transportation electrification, and so on, that can support the equity, that can be supported in an equitable manner. So I believe that equity strategy is also due to finish in the summer this year with the process, and they will work with our planning division's program development from July till December to collect these feedbacks and report back on their new plans. And this particular slide kind of summarizes everything we talked about today, and it's a timeline of where we are right now, where we're going. From the first line, we see that we will be, by end of this month, publishing our 2022 SLTRP final draft. And in yellow indicates development of our regulatory CEC IRP, which is already started. We're hoping to get final guidelines from CEC in May, but we are pretty confident we can wrap it up by October for your approval. More importantly, we have a host of analysis and studies, like Jake said, on implementation strategies that are wrapping up, including equity strategy, IHRP, transmission plans, distribution plans, and they will all go into the input to our next SLTRP that will prepare a package of assumptions. While we're doing that, I just mentioned in a parallel, there will be program implementation workshops, which results then will also go into the assumption package and modeling for next SLTRP. Both of these processes, programming workshops as well as SLTRP, will reconvene advisory group meetings. For us, for SLTRP project, we expect that to start in October of this year. Once we get the feedbacks from advisory group, our engineers will convene very lengthy modeling process that ends about March, April of 2024, with the beginning of compiling SLTRP at that time, and with public responses, we hope to finish mid to end of 2024, our process. And I have a final slide, if you, Jay, don't mind to change it. In conclusion, the WP has learned what is theoretically possible through modeling and analysis of 2022 SLTRP process, including with our stakeholders' engagement. But putting this into action will require developing a resource-constrained SLTRP case. Determining what is the achievable IHRP will be key. What staffing is needed to maintain our business as usual, maintaining our infrastructure, PSRP program, but also executing all these projects that we need to do to meet our LA 100 goals. It also will require outage coordination and juggling concurrent major projects, and that needs to be carefully planned as well. These efforts will provide LADWP also with equitable and affordable power plan, which would include impact of the Inflation Reduction Act. When we did the modeling of 2022, we didn't have yet impact of this act, as well as bipartisan infrastructure law, but our engineers are putting together comprehensive outline how these changes can be implemented in next SLTRP. In addition, LADWP will address two largest drivers of the rate, which is energy efficiency and distribution updates. The power plan will also expand rate analysis and include energy burden, as Jay mentioned. As a part of developing an equitable and affordable plan, upcoming customer workshop programs I just mentioned will provide very valuable feedback. LA 100 study and 2022 SLTRP both showed that there are common investments across all scenarios. And knowing this, DWP will develop 2030 power system roadmap that would incorporate SLTRP 2022, but also 10-year transmission plans, distribution plans, and power system reliability plan, as well as other plans. This is an actionable plan. This roadmap is expected to incorporate outcomes of workshops and equity strategy, and will show specific projects and programs and initiatives that the power system must undertake to stay on a track and become equitable, affordable, and reliable in our carbon future. We can open up for any questions.
Are there questions or comments?
No, I would just echo the President's comments. Thank you very much for the very informative, clear presentation and all of the incredible work that has gone into this. As a former stakeholder in the SLTRP process, I really especially appreciate the workshops and the stakeholder engagement work that goes into this. So thank you.
Thank you. Terrific. Then thank you very much. Look forward to the next presentation. Jason, they did you proud. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioners.
We will do filed items. Are there any questions or comments related to any of the filed items?
No.
Then we'll move to item K, which is the approval of minutes.
President McCLAIN-HILL, could we ask to have that item deferred until the next meeting? The
Yeah, I
Board
was
Secretary.
going to say, I see that I've got a deferment for K1.
Thank you.
So we'll just defer the approval of the minutes altogether?
K2 would be fine.
K2 is fine? Okay, terrific. So then,
Move approval of K2 minutes for April 11th, 2023.
Seconded?
terrific. Would you call the roll?
Commissioner KATZ? Aye. President McCLAIN-HILL?
Aye.
Commissioner NEEMAN Brady is absent. Vice President Ruiz?
Yes.
3 ayes, motion adopted.
Terrific. We'll then move to items for approval, and we'll start with L2. That's called by Commissioner Ruiz. Did you have any questions or comments? I'm sorry, did you require a presentation on that?
I don't require a presentation, but I did have some questions specifically because there's an amendment request on this, and the amendment amount is not to exceed $4 million. And since that is a substantial amount, I just wanted to get the justification.
Thank you, Commissioner. George Raffel with Customer Service. So the justification is this is our access to customer credit data that we utilize in deposits, usually or traditionally for deposit assessments. So what we're adding is the ability to handle the commercial accounts to this. But in addition, since 2020, when this contract was established, we've established some other processes where we're utilizing this data. For example, the low-income process where we streamlined it. So as part of this, we do some sample checking for those that we no longer request income data. We do like a 1% sampling every quarter to see which ones we need to follow up with to request the income data.
So are we expanding the scope of work? Is that why we're increasing the dollar amount, or?
No, it's just a different use of the data. It's still the access of data. So the only scope change is the addition of commercial accounts in addition to the residential. But it's still the same data that we're accessing. We're just accessing it more frequently.
And then I saw that one of our other contracts that do similar work was canceled. So I think it was a TransUnion. So was this to pick up that work?
Yes. At the same time, when we had an RFP back in about 2020, one contract was awarded to Experian for residential data. One was for commercial was assigned to TransUnion. Unfortunately, as the work was being developed or prepared, they weren't able to meet the conditions of the contract. We tried to work with them, but unfortunately it didn't work out. So we did cancel that, and now we're transitioning it to Experian, who is the number 2 bidder for the commercial accounts.
You said it's not to expand the scope, but the very first line says the proposed amendment is to add scope.
No, I clarified where I was saying the scope addition is the addition of the commercial accounts, so that's the scope change. But then the dollars are primarily for that additional scope and then for the frequency of data access.
Okay, I just didn't hear how that
Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse, so it didn't come
Yeah,
across.
I apologize, it was unclear. I think we're expanding our scope of the use of the same information that we already use from them.
No.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, I don't know that that's right. I mean, the reason I don't know that that's right is because the scope of a contract is defined by, what
they're providing.
Yeah, by the RFP and what we said we were going to this contract for.
Right.
So the scope of the contract was residential. We're expanding the scope to include commercial, correct?
Correct.
I guess that's better said, yes.
Okay, and then as a result of that expanded scope, we're going from $2 million to $4 million. So we're adding an additional $4 million. So we're expanding the scope and we're tripling the value of the contract. So I'm just curious about how all that works. And the reason I'm curious about how all of it works is there are things that we apparently can't do and yet we can do this. So I don't understand what guides our contracting practices. I don't understand how we get from, we had a contract with TransUnion and it didn't work, which again, I don't understand. So, and we had a contract, was their contract for 4 million?
Well, our contract was for 2 million, now it's 6 million.
No, the TransUnion contract, the
okay,
contract
got
that
it.
we had, that we
What
are
did
using
happen
this
with
to replace
TransUnion?
this.
So I apologize. I didn't explain it very well. So the TransUnion contract, that was canceled for lack of performance. They weren't able to complete the items that they were contracted for. So with that, that was approximately about $500,000. So we are moving that over to Experian. The other is when we established these contracts, we had an estimate as to the frequency with which we'd be accessing the data, which is what we get charged for each time we access a certain account. The data, we get charged for that. We've seen a spike in customer turnover in terms of movement and so on. So each time a customer is establishing service, we check the credit risk and then assign deposits based on that. So that has increased significantly, which has contributed to the increase of that. In addition,
So it's not the scope we increase, it's the volume.
Correct. So there was one element, which is the commercial, is the scope change. The rest of the dollars are based on the volume. So one is the customer turnover required for increasing the deposit checks. The other is we are establishing a process to return deposits quicker. So we are going to be running checks so that way we can return deposits sooner to customers. We're also doing, which we did not have when we did this, is doing the spot checks to ensure for the low-income discount or easy save discount, where we're doing about a 1% check every quarter to see which ones we need to follow up with for additional data. There's also, we are looking to access the data more holistically so that way we can identify customers that need assistance. And that could be, we can outreach to in terms of assistance, bill management programs and so on, which we didn't do before. So again, these are all elements where we will be accessing the data in order to better serve our customers. We're really committed to not waiting until and reacting. What we're trying to do, establish in our operations, is where we're actively kind of engaging with the customers, working with them, and identifying who and with what we should be targeting them with. So these are all elements that we're, having, resulted in a significant increase in this.
So I'm not opposed to this. I just, when I see something that initially was 2 million, and now we're at 6 million, I just felt we owed it to the public to give a explanation.
Fully understand. And just to mention is, it is 2 option years that we're looking at. It'll be an expenditure limit. We are right now evaluating, just because how things did not work out with TransUnion, so we're evaluating the marketplace, talking to some other utilities and industries and how they're, being able to handle these credit activities, and then working on an RFP. So this is a limit, but we may be back with an RFP and resulting contract sooner than that.
Move approval of this item?
Well, I was going to say, I may be opposed to it. And the reason that I may be opposed to it is because I don't even know why we bother at a certain level, because they're so idiosyncratic in terms of our policies, processes, or lack thereof with respect to RFPs. What's the point if this was done in 2020? So if we just come back and say, can I just up the amount and add to the scope, and that didn't work, and oh, by the way, we want to use it differently. It may all make perfectly good sense, but it's really difficult for me to say that there is any rhyme or reason with respect to how we contract, or that we have the time or the resources to sit through and examine every single thing that's on our agenda with respect to these contracts, or even that, So I guess I'm just having serious heartburn with the whole process. And we'll be looking for some guidepost as to what is or isn't acceptable, because it just, like I said, well, I've had this conversation now with our new head of supply chain services. It seems like procurement is the tail that wags the dog around here. And everybody is always agonizing over and trying to figure out what to do, how to do it, and how to get something in a contract form and passed, to the board so we can just say yes. And anytime you ask a question, it's like, that's interesting. It's rarely just straightforward. This is what we scoped, this is what we're doing, this is how we're using it, this is the flexibility we built into the contract, this is how it. So I don't know if it's a flexibility issue, that we need more flexibility on the front end so that good business decisions can be made, and we're not having to do amendments and these kinds of things, or we're not having to make, changes that might be, good business practice, but that just seem odd or very one-off. So I don't know if that's the issue. I don't know if it's that we need to plan better on the front end. I'm just not sure. But I don't feel, I'm not crazy about what's before us on this, what's before us on this tiny little thing that I'm going to be looking at. I just don't, we need a better system to deal with these things. So that's sort of where I am on it.
And then the reason I was asking about the scope, because from a legal standpoint, I'm certainly not an attorney, but I have been told in the past that you can't significantly change the scope of work without an additional process. You can't just amend a contract and say, okay, now we found all this other scope and we're going to add it to this. So
I'll, of course, defer to the experts, but since the Experian was deemed to be a qualified bidder into the RFP for the commercial element, and because of the issues with TransUnion, we went to the number 2 bidder, which was Experian, and we were able to, instead of establishing a second contract, we thought it would be easier to just fold it into.
Okay, as long as legal's vetted it, I'm okay with it, but.
George, to clarify, is most of this just increased use of the existing services? Is that what the bulk of it is or not?
The bulk of it is on the residential side, which is the one where the contract is we have for now, increasing the frequency with which we access the data.
It is helpful to know that they were a bidder already on the commercial side.
Yes, and they were the number 2 bidder.
That seems standard practice, but I don't know if it would be helpful to have any general summary of RFP process at some point. Might be.
Believe me, it's
good
all
briefing.
over the map. We've had all kinds of presentations, and there's the presentation, and then there's what happens.
There's the practice,
and it's
sure.
all over the map. So, but yes, it will probably be useful to talk about supply chain services in some way that's a little more organized, and that isn't picking on George and the contract that he needs today. So
maybe future contract amendment items could just include a bit more explanation on the get-go.
So there's a motion and a second. Would you call the roll?
Commissioner KATZ?
Aye.
President McCLAIN-HILL?
Aye.
Vice President Ruiz?
Aye.
3 ayes, motion adopted.
Terrific. If we could move now to L4.
Michael DeAndrea from Human Resources here to answer any questions.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'll hear you fine. So
Michael
it
DeAndrea,
says, I asked for this. It says it's an amendment and a ratification. Can you explain to me what's going on here?
Right. This was the contract that we utilized with Ralph Anderson and Associates when we hired our Inspector General last year. As you know, the Inspector General was here for about 7 months and then decided to move on to the City Controller's office. This contract had expired in December. And so we entered into conversations with supply chain about the best way to move forward, because the contract has a provision, essentially a service level guarantee, that says that if the Inspector General candidate resigns or is removed from the position for cause, they will redo the executive search free of charge for all professional services. And so we realized having to redo that search, we reached out to Anderson immediately to begin that process. We realized the contract having expired, we would not have an ability or authority to pay any potential invoices that may come. Now, since they were doing the professional services free of charge, those any invoices might have been potential travel for candidates for in-person or additional advertisement if they didn't get any candidates or something like that. I think it's very unlikely that there will be an invoice for these services that are being performed right now. But in the case that there is, we needed an approval to move forward.
Is the amount that you chose then as a placeholder, is that just based on because greater than that would have to be a new bid process or?
No, I think it was an estimate of what those additional non-professional expenses might
just sort of like the worst case.
Right.
We may not spend anything under this.
Okay.
Because we're almost done with the process, but we don't have a contract that allows us if we.
Right, and I think conceptually, because it's a redo of work that was performed in the prior contract, I think that they thought an amendment to the existing contract would be the most appropriate way to go forward. It's an amendment to that contract, although it does have a new agreement number, which I believe is a requirement.
And this was not foreseeable. And I didn't think that the
It just happened that the contract did not last past the time that their guarantee lasted, basically.
Right. Not good for us, good for the city controller.
I'm sorry?
The fact that our inspector general left after 7 months was a bad break for us.
Okay, so we don't need to extend the contract in order to take advantage of the guarantee with respect to rebidding that exists under the contract, period. So that's not the purpose of extending this contract. The purpose of extending the contract is so that we can pay if an invoice were to come in relative to cost or expenses associated with the search that was done.
Right. That's all it is.
Okay, but we're extending to December 23rd.
We probably don't need it that long, to be honest, but.
I'm sorry?
We probably doesn't need to be that long, to be honest.
December 2023, so it covers in case something happens.
Correct.
As opposed to, for instance, our just being responsible for the expenses on the front side as opposed to reimbursing them.
I guess that's the way it's set up, right? If there's candidate travel or other things that are expenses, we reimburse that this way.
No, but that's under the contract that doesn't exist.
Right.
My only
exactly.
point is that the other option would have been for us to just front the expenses as opposed to reimbursing the expenses.
I believe so, yeah. I don't know. I believe we could do that, yes. I mean,
I think there was discussion of a brand-new contract for this small amount in the.
You didn't hear me, obviously.
Well,
what I said was the other option would be, because all you're talking about here is an expense reimbursement.
Yes.
Right? The other option would be for us just to pay the expenses directly as opposed to reimbursing them.
Yes, that's correct.
And that wouldn't require anything. It wouldn't require a contract extension. It wouldn't require all of this paperwork. It wouldn't require, it would require different paperwork because we would be paying for travel if there were travel. If there were an ad, we'd be paying for the ad. So whatever these negligible expenses are, we just pay them directly as opposed to paying for them through a contract reimbursement to the.
right. And I assume if we had individual expenses, we probably find a way to issue a PO to pay them back for their expenses or pay them up front. Yeah.
No, we could pay them up front. So that was the other option. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and Michael did work just with purchasing of this, but the best way to fix this was, and this was the suggestion. So, it was prior to Edith, though. I won't put her in that spot.
I'm sorry?
The discussions were with Aaron, our prior director.
About the best way to resolve this issue, or the potential issue, so.
Yeah, I don't know that was the best way, but that is a way.
It does work, yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will move the approval of item L 4.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner KATZ?
Aye.
President McCLAIN-HILL?
Aye.
Vice President RUIZ?
Aye.
3 ayes, motion adopted.
And then if we could move to L9, please.
So I called L9 special as well. And my questions on this one, I don't need a presentation, but I do have questions. So what I understand, this is a 5-year contract not to exceed $75 million. But when you get to the SBE and the subcontractor listings, it says that they have agreed to a goal of 29% on the SBE, the subcontractors. But when they listed a bunch of names, and there was no percentages. So you had a few MBEs and no women businesses at all under that subcontractors. But what I was getting confused about is that there were no percentage they just listed a bunch of people and we don't know who's getting what. Right. So is that normally how we do it, or?
So the SBE, I'm sorry, Eric Montag, I'm an assistant director in Power Engineering Services. This is a contract that will go to directly serve what my group does, major projects.
Which that I have no problem with.
Yep, thank you. So the SBE, DVBE, those participating programs are gender neutral and race neutral. And so consequently, we cannot legally set mandates for WBE and
No, and I get that, and that was just an observation that I saw in there, but there's a bunch of people listed and no percentages about who's going to, these subcontractors are going to be utilized.
Right.
That was my real issue. I just threw the other stuff in there.
Hi, my name is Keyshawn Cassandra. I'm a manager under Eric. In Worley Parsons' proposal, there is percentages listed. The reason that they are TBD, because the subcontracting is based on the task order that's issued. So the amount would depend on how much task we could put out or issue and what those tasks are for and which subcontractors get utilized. But Worley has broken that 29% down per company. But in our report, we don't know, which ones would be utilized. They're saying if this total amount was used, this is how they would spend it. But we don't have an expenditure amount right now. It's based on the tasks that are issued. So that's kind of why the specific percentages are not listed in the board package itself.
Okay, and so they have a goal of 29% utilizing small businesses. And so in 5 years, when this contract is up, do we reconcile that and say, okay, yes, they achieved 29%, or at what point do we reconcile all this?
Joe, you want to address that? It's your group. Or?
I can address that. So, yeah, because this is a broad contract with a general scope of work at this point. It's a very big contract with a lot of task orders that will be issued. We don't know the real specifics of what's actually going. It's a little different than like a construction project where they have plans and they know exactly where they're going to spend their subcontracting dollars. So we asked the prime contractor to make a good estimate. They've made estimates for based on all what they think if they had gotten the full $75 million expenditure. But at the end of it, we asked for they committed to 29% small business participation. The way we'll calculate that, the achievement is based on the total expenditures. So overall, we'll look at all their small business expenditures and then divide it by the total expenditures, and that'll determine the percentages that they're meeting. So whatever they get, it's proportionate. So if let's just say, for example, extremely, if they only use half the 75 million, as long as the small business percentage that they use is also 29% of that amount.
Whatever amount
right,
they get.
And that's how we would measure it. Just,
okay,
so it's overall usage over the.
I just want to make sure when we have people set goals or we set goals, we set 25%, they said 29%, which is good. However, I just want to make sure, where's the accountability in that? That's kind of more like a systematic question. How do we know that they met that goal or made a concerted effort to to accomplish that goal.
Yeah, as task orders or issues and invoices are submitted, they are to submit subcontractor utilization reports, which the contract administrators will take and input into our system, and then we'll monitor it as we go along.
Well, except it says, so it says the LB preference program was not a determining factor in the recommendation for award for this agreement. And is that per council that it can't be?
Oh, you're talking about number D with the LBPP, the Local Business Preference Program? Edith, you want to take that?
So the LBPP applies to certain areas. So if you're in LA County, the LBPP would apply, they would get an 8%. So in this case, LBP was applicable to this RP, but this company, Worley Parsons, did not qualify for the 8 percentage points for the contract.
Because they're not within the city, or?
I think it's LA County, then it has to be like 2/3% of your warehouse or material has to be in stock. So I don't think this is a material contract, it's a labor contract. So that is why it did not apply.
Thank you.
So although it was applicable to the bid, but it did not apply to the award. So they did not get the 8%.
And for me, I just want to make sure somebody's checking this at the end, that, and it was said that they, when they get the invoices, they do make sure that they track the SBE usage.
I guess for me, I just have a whole different set of issues, and mine is that we actually substantively have supplier diversity impacts that are, that we achieve our supplier diversity goals, and that I don't really know how to keep approving contracts and keep not achieving our goals. And I haven't had anybody tell me how that's going to happen. And like just looking at this, there's nothing here that suggests to me that we're going to hit the goals. And so the only thing that I think is, well, then I just won't approve the contracts.
The only reassurance I can possibly provide is this is a returning contractor, Worley, on this type of contract with major projects. They have history of what we typically ask for. Of course, the volume now, because of the presentation Jay gave earlier, our volume is much higher. And so this contract's much higher. But what I can say, and I don't know if this is going to be satisfactory to you, is that Worley goes into it with this experience of what kind of tasks we've tasked them with before, what the RFP scope says, and so they try to translate that into that 29%, but they'll never know until we write the task, right?
And so did they hit their goals last time?
They, that's a good question. As you guys, as we were talking.
Because you brought up their history, so I mean,
yeah,
we have history with them. Did they hit it?
Yeah, as you were talking, that popped into my head, and I don't have that answer. I wasn't.
So why don't we just defer this until a future board meeting when we can have a conversation that is better informed by the range of board interest, as opposed to taking it up now and potentially having it not approved.
Okay.
And then I know that there are some issues with respect to some wording in the contract that the ratepayer advocate was interested in having addressed.
They've worked those out in one area completely and vetted that with the prime contractor. So that's on the first area, that's already taken care of. But, and they have agreed to take additional steps in other areas. I'm sorry, it's completely worked out on item 3 in my list. The other 2 areas have to be as it develops. It's really reporting requirements.
So if we could, when we see this back, have everything sort of all tidied up, spelled out, amended and aligned in a way that it's clean, that would be terrific.
So can we defer it for one meeting? Because I don't want to hold up things.
I mean, assuming they can come back in a meeting with something that is more satisfactory, sure. But at the end of the day, as long as we keep approving contracts with nothing but flimsy verbal sort of a conversation, then we're going to keep getting the results that we get. So if we want different results, we have to be willing to just take different action. And I'm going to trust that this is that this can all be aligned in a way that meets all of our priorities, and that won't be difficult to achieve. But I would suggest that when it comes back, that we have a pretty strong presentation around how we are meeting our supplier diversity goals in the context of this agreement, and frankly others, because this is just the beginning of, I think, a shift, at least from my perspective, in how we view outside contracting.
And the reason I was saying if we can defer it till the next meeting instead of taking a vote today, then, I don't know, I'm sure it's pretty cumbersome to have to go through the whole process again. And I think we have very specific questions that need to be answered. That's why I was saying just defer to the next meeting versus just bring it back where it could be a long process. I don't know. That's just my thoughts.
If I could suggest, if we come back, when we come back, we can provide a presentation which may answer beyond just the supply chain questions, but the questions about all the questions that were brought up. Let's just say it that way, because some of the stuff that was brought up here were explained in the presentation, but specifically some were not. So we can definitely strengthen that. And I'm in no rush to rush in 2 weeks. I want to give the board a complete package. So let us get back to the board secretary through our channels of how we're going to get this through, and we'll get us time frame. But we are rushed. I just don't want to rush an answer. So 1 or 2 board meetings would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the answers.
Then that completes our open session agenda, and we are moving into closed session. I will defer to our general counsel for the magic transition words.
The board shall recess into closed session for confidential discussion of the items listed on the agenda. After the closed session, the board will publicly report any action taken in closed session and the vote or abstention thereon of every member present in accordance with California Government Code Section 54957.1.